make sure. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, the February 12th, 2018 meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors. The first item on our agenda is closed meeting. Specifically, the subject is discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, or planning commission. And consultation with legal counsel regarding matters requiring legal advice, MVP pipeline project. Did I get both of those and that? And specifically the certification, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County hereby enters into a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following. Section 2.23711, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. 1, Mountain Valley Pipeline. Discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplinary, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, employees of any public body. Planning Commission. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okay. I'm doing my little things here. Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Ms. DeMotts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Is there a motion to come out of closed meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Ms. DeMotts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone? Aye. Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
I'm sorry, Mr. King?
Oh,
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
there we go.
7 ayes.
That's right. I don't get to vote twice, though.
That's right.
Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.23711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting. And only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. And I skipped a line there, closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies. Marty, did I catch everything?
We did.
Okay. Is there a motion on the certification? And before we go any further, this certification is our board's word to you that we're only discussing things that we're allowed to discuss in closed meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. DeMotts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone? Aye. Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye. The next item on our agenda is a moment of silence, and after that, I would ask the county administrator to lead us in the pledge.
Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Before we go any further, I'm going to call on the county administrator. We've received some emails regarding the MVP pipeline and some of the issues that may be coming up. And before we go any further, I'm going to call on the county administrator to give us a brief update.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that a number of citizens are very interested in the activities related to the Mountain Valley Pipeline project. As you're probably aware, FERC has allowed that project to move forward, and it's getting ready to move forward in Giles County pretty soon. We anticipate some activity in Montgomery County probably within the next couple of weeks that'll begin with tree felling, cutting of trees. The staff plans to have a work session with the Board of Supervisors at our next meeting, which is on February 26th, 2 weeks from tonight. So I would invite folks that are interested in learning more about what staff contacts you'll need once things begin in Montgomery County. We'll have some discussion of that at that meeting. I do want to mention that several citizens have done a really good job of outlining some of the concerns and some of the questions. Staff is already working on those. Roanoke County actually had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. We had someone who attended that meeting. We are also in contact with Roanoke County staff to find out exactly what things were issues for them as far as the meeting goes. But we recognize that's a very important subject to a number of people in our community, and we'll be updating the board on the February 26th meeting. And also, I do want to mention some of the questions that have been submitted. We're going to begin to get those addressed and post those to the county's website. We have a link that's right on the county's homepage. If you go to montva.com, there'll be a link right on the homepage that'll take you to the Mountain Valley pipeline issues. And as we begin to have those questions addressed, we'll post them there, and then we'll be talking about them with the full group on Monday the 26th. So just wanted to make folks aware of that this evening.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is Montgomery County Regional Tourism Yearly Report. Lisa?
Lisa, y'all packed the room tonight.
Wow.
Very good.
With that,
You packed the room tonight for your presentation.
All right. Well, thank you for making time to hear the tourism update. We're always happy to talk with you guys. I've asked Irene Kilmer of our office to come help me click through, so we will try to be brief tonight. We know you have a full agenda. Well, it's hard to believe that we're going into our 6th year of promoting tourism in Montgomery County in the towns of Blacksburg and Christiansburg. And on behalf of the Tourism Board and the Montgomery Tourism Development Council, thank you for your support and of this very important economic development program. There's been many accomplishments during this past year, and we'll only have time to hit some of the highlights, but I'm always happy to share program information at any time. So tonight, we want to show you some of the tourism metrics that we track and to provide a brief overview of what occurred in 2017 and to look forward in our planning for 2018. You were given a packet probably some weeks ago, looked a little something like that. And just to save some time, I included a letter to give a brief background of the program and how we're funded and things such as that for a few of you who are new to the board. Also in the folder, you'll find several examples of promotional tools that we've developed in-house. In-house saves us money. We've got a great creative person on staff, so we try to do as much of that as possible. And you'll also find an informational sheet that notes the most recent tourism revenue statistics for Montgomery County as reported by the U.S. Travel Association for the state's tourism office. Travel expenditures in Montgomery County increased by 3.1% in 2016. That's the most recent full report that we have. We'll get in fall of this year, we'll have 2017. And by all accounts, we should have increases from 2017 as well. So the financial benefit from tourism can lead to an increase in the creation of jobs and services, fewer taxes for our residents, and diversification of the local economy. It also helps to attract new business and create entrepreneurial opportunities. Some benefits contribute more to quality of life and sense of place, so they're not as easily measured. However, it's important to measure where we can. I have 3 slides I want to share with you tonight that show common industry metrics that are important for us to monitor. And so you'll see 3 here, visitor spending being among the most important, local tax receipts that are derived from that visitor spending, and occupancy. On this slide, you're going to see it trending from 2014 to 2017, although again, we still haven't got the latest data from U.S. Travel Association for 2017. So the blue and the green lines kind of stopped in 2016. You'll see some ups and downs, but this slide shows percentage of change year over year. So don't get too alarmed when it's decreasing, say from 2015 to 2016. What that means is in 2016, in this case, the occupancy did not increase over 2015 quite as sharp as it did from 2015 over 2014. And then this slide shows some tourism metrics, again, visitor spending, and the local tax receipts and employment, but also the average daily rate and the revenue per available room, which come from the Smith Tribal Association. They give us a monthly report, and that's very important because occupancy measures the rental, the hotel rooms, and how they're rented out of all the hotel space available. Revenue per available room, you'll see, has maintained a pretty good standing along with average daily rate, even though you saw on the slide before, occupancy didn't increase with as much vigor in 2016 as it did in 2015. I think that that's largely due because we have some more hotel rooms in our market, and that will continue to increase for a little while. But what this slide tells us is ADR and RevPAR, our revenue managers in the hotels are doing a pretty good job, and we're still in demand for lodging and for our destination. And then this last numbers slide shows again the average daily rate and the revenue per available room, and we'll add on those other measures as we get those. But all in all, we expect 2017 to be a good year as well when all the counts come in. Okay, some of the things that we've been doing in 2017, we received a grant from the Virginia Tourism Corporation to get our new go-to-town car. And so we do get around a lot, not only in the county, but in the New River Valley and then throughout the state, really. So we always want to be advertising and showing people what a great place that they could visit. Travel media, we've been working hard with getting travel writers into the area. Roots Rated, which is focused on outdoor adventure. They came into our area, spent some time with us. And the most recent, Eric the Travel Guy, just shared with Mr. Meadows earlier, we worked with a film crew that came in back in October, and we'll have some good video to come out of that. We received the overview, the final edited version, and we'll be part of a PBS series in April, Beyond Your Backyard. We also took our show on the road, and we hit 3 state welcome centers, one in Rocky Gap coming out of West Virginia, one in Lambsburg coming up from North Carolina, and another one when Virginia Tech played at the FedEx Field back in September, I believe it was. So we were up in that visitor center for that. And then here locally, we want the community to know that we're here, and we're a resource when family and friends come to visit. So we're out with community events. Most recently, we've had a table over in the Christiansburg Aquatic Center, and we have some great interns that help us out with that. We've also, we do trade shows. I think many of you know that we work with the Crooked Road with one of those 19 counties. And so we do a lot with them. We joined them and VTC in the Raleigh Convention Center for a trade show back in September. And then we had an event. We partnered with the Crooked Road and Montgomery Museum and some local folks with an event in the new Ignite Great Road Hall. And so we're doing some great things there, and we're really proud of a new Junior Appalachian Musicians program, the first in Montgomery County. We launched that with this most recent semester, and so we've had our 3rd class so far of 4th and 5th graders over in Christiansburg, and we're just having a great time with that program. Group travel. Thank you, Supervisor Biggs, and we look forward to working with more folks and bringing groups that, whether you belong to associations or different groups that, you can help us persuade your folks to come into the area. So we would help plan those, help coordinate. We also worked with an event that came into downtown Christiansburg to start an auto tour. They started in downtown Christiansburg and they ended in Rome, Georgia, and hit several places in between. So just activities like this really help us to get boots on the ground. People here, and so they will know exactly, why we think this is such a great place to not only live but to visit. Advertising, we need to do that, whether it be word of mouth or through print, digital, all the forms of advertising. And so we did not leave any stone unturned in 2017, and we are planning for more in 2018. And then we just put together a quick little video here. Partnerships, they're so important. Without the partnerships, we would not be able to have the capability of doing all that we do. And we have many great partners in our community. Okay, so what's planned for 2018? Well, we want to focus on group and business travel. We want to do more of that. We've got a lot of great hotel rooms, new property here, and we need to fill them. So that's a good opportunity for us. We want to focus on our soft periods. And we've identified through those metrics that December through March, midweek business, that's where we need to focus. Marketing products, we're going to be looking to do more of the same and new, just creating more new ways of getting our brand out there. And then we're going to be looking at advertising revenue. I think that you're all aware that we're funded with a percentage of the occupancy tax that comes through hotel taxes. We're looking for new ways outside of that and grants to derive revenue for our program. And then partnerships, again, so very important. And we'll look for building partnerships that we already have in place and creating new ones. So with that, I would open to any questions that you may have, or just to remind you again, I'm happy to talk about our program and more of what we didn't cover tonight at any time.
Start off with Supervisor King. Any questions?
No questions. Thank y'all for what you do.
Supervisor Fichikowski.
Yes. Do you keep track of how many new hotels are planning on coming into the area? I know we've in the last few years, we've had many of them popped up all around the area, but do we know if we got more planned?
I get a monthly report that tells me how many rooms, and I do meet with the board every month and talk with our planning directors and keep tabs on what has been planned and what has been approved, what may just be conceptual at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor DeMonts.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to brag on you both a little bit because you can't really do that yourselves. I know that you have a very strict and very limited budget, and the work that you do is just absolutely amazing, and the spirit and enthusiasm that you have for this community and take all over the state. I really want to thank you for that. That means a lot. You've built in a very short time, a huge package for brand awareness, and it's really incredible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Biggs.
I also want to brag on both of you. You couldn't ask for two more positive ambassadors for our region, our county, than Lisa and Irene. And the work that you did on that VACO meeting was just fantastic. It's still talked about at the VACO board, so you should know that. And I think that whenever you have something like that, other people are sort of looking to see, I've had people ask me about you guys, so don't move. Don't go anywhere.
Supervisor Bone.
In your chart with the lines for the tax increases and stuff like that, have you seen any Airbnb draw away from that or impact in the last couple of years?
Really good question. And I thank you for bringing that up because none of this includes Airbnb or any of the lodging by owner. So, and I haven't really noticed it. We ask pretty regularly. We ask our hoteliers, are you seeing it? So we know that they're out there. We know that the county and both towns have plenty of those spaces available. So far, we're not seeing it eat into this, but now with the new hotel rooms in the market, it places a little bit more of okay, maybe we need to look more closely at this, and but so far, not really.
Is there a way that you can capture all of the Airbnb occupancy?
Irene and I do a little espionage sometimes, and we go on just looking at the locations and to see, who's listing themselves. So that really is kind of, I think, maybe more of a local government kind of conversation with, whether to actually track them and tax them like the hotels.
Mm-hmm. And then the last question that I have is the local tax receipts. That's specifically just for hotels?
No, local tax receipts, that is a measure that comes out of visitor spending. So every year, the U.S. Travel Association gives us a number for visitor spending just in Montgomery County, and then they give us a number for the tax receipts that, or the tax revenue that was derived from that visitor spending.
And I want to echo the fellow board members. I think you all are pretty fantastic. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd.
No question. I want to say thank you for all you do, especially the JAM program. I was familiar with it coming out of North Carolina several years ago, so I'm proud to see that coming here.
We'd like to see you there sometime.
I actually had a call about doing some repair on instruments, so I'll be there.
Thank you very much.
A couple of questions I want to ask you. One, as far as that doesn't show what's outside of the towns, and because we've got limited hotels outside of the towns, most of that tax revenue is staying within the towns. Is that fair to say?
Most of the tax,
On the occupancy taxes and those.
yes,
Okay.
the occupancy tax.
And meals taxes as well.
Within the two towns, yes.
It would stay within the two towns.
Virtually all of
One
it.
thing I would want to point out here is, again, with that 2016, that red line is focused on lodging and the occupancy. And you see it didn't increase as much as the 2015, but visitor spending increased slightly. And the thing we need to remind ourselves is, yes, overnight lodging is important. People stay, that means they're staying longer, they're eating, but those day trippers, we call them, people who are coming in for the day and then going back home, they're spending money as well. And also, the people that are here, if we are doing our jobs and giving them more of an idea or reasons to spend money, things that they can do while they're here, even though the occupancy may not be as great as the year before, that's very important.
I was trying to think of the hotels that are out in the county, and that's they're going to be around the 109 exit. Am I thinking correctly?
There's one right now.
The Comfort
Oh,
Inn.
we're hoping for another one soon.
Right.
Well, they've actually broken ground on the second one out there.
Okay. And is there any others that are out in the county? I'm just trying to.
Not in the
Not that
county.
I'm
Okay.
aware of.
And then you and I talked a little bit about during the soft times, talking about trying to recruit e-tournaments, electronic tournaments,
Right.
those type of things. I would just be curious, and I don't expect you to respond tonight, but just to reach out to some of the members of the hotels to see, because it seems to be a thing that is growing at this point in time as we're seeing more kids not necessarily playing football, but playing football and Madden
Right.
with controllers, and that might be a way to fill up those hotels during the soft times, is set up those type of tournaments.
Yes,
So-
we're definitely looking for that type of business, and that's something that we can actually talk with them. We meet with the hoteliers 4 times a year, and just to kind of catch up on what's going on in the market, and so that may be something we can talk with them Wednesday about.
Also, as someone that's here occasionally late at night, I see that your office is open. I greatly appreciate the extra hours that you put on a regular basis. Thank you both.
And thank you. We love what we do.
Chris?
Mr. Chair, can I add one more thing?
Sure, absolutely.
I forgot to thank you for all you do when people come in and don't know where to go downstairs. You guys are the ones that are showing them, and you're so nice about it. And even though it interrupts your own work, I've seen that time and time again.
They are true ambassadors, even though
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
does like Bellevue Winery count as,
Lodging, yes, because of the
Ba-
B&B.
right.
Yes.
And there's probably are a smattering of B&Bs
Yeah.
out in the county where, but I was thinking of the big hotels, we're hopefully getting ready to double our amount of hotels out in the county.
That would be good.
So,
Yes.
any other questions? Thank y'all.
Thank you.
thanks, ladies.
The next up is VDOT. Mr. Clark? Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Eileen.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
I just got a few updates. Not a whole lot of things because we are in the middle of trying to do our own work in between snow events and other types of weather events. A couple of the maintenance items, we have gotten some decent weather. We're trying to do some patching. We're doing some patching when we can. This is the pothole season, and we're just going to try to keep keep pace with them until spring gets here. We can get some more hot asphalt and stop some of this freezing weather. We've also been trying to keep up the gravel roads because those are the other things that really take a beating during winter weather, because the stone we put on then gets pushed off when we plow snow, and the freezing and the thawing. We've had some very cold temperatures, as you all know, in January, and that's particularly damaging to the gravel roads, and then as well as the potholes. Other maintenance type of things, we had a sinkhole on George's Run recently. We had to shut down a lane and fill that in with some very stone and some floor-filled concrete to cap the thing off. Sinkholes are not unusual in the county, but I know that I've seen one on George's Run before. A lot of times they're out near sort of near the 118 exit where we have some issues there, but this one was in George's Run. For construction projects, we've got the Southgate project continues, it's open, but there's still a lot more work to be done out there. And then the bridge over the new river on 81, those are the big construction projects that are ongoing. This summer on the secondary system, we've got some unpaved road work planned. We've got about a half a mile section of Yellow Sulphur Road, sort of on the, I guess it would be the Christiansburg end. It's got a completion date of September. It's out for bids right now. The bids have not come in yet, but it carries a completion date of September. We've got a revenue sharing project that we're working on. One of the county's revenue sharing projects was the Brush Creek Road. We're going to do the end of Brush Creek Road. That's closest to the Floyd County line, Dobbins Hollow Road. We're going to do the section down the hill right there. The previous section that we did on Brush Creek Road was on the other end. We've been sort of working our way on either end, same way we've been doing with Yellow Sulphur. We're hoping to advertise the construction replacement of the bridge on Mount Pleasant Road. We paved Mount Pleasant Road on either ends of that one-lane bridge. It's kind of in the center of the lower part, and that bridge is due to be replaced. It will require closing the road. We've been talking with the school system and about that. There's been public notices. We'll do more public outreach as that gets closer, but that project is scheduled to end at the end of next year. So we'll be advertising it here in the next few months, getting bids back. Probably won't see any construction until late summer or the fall. Along those lines of the secondary road projects, we are scheduled, we always schedule a secondary road 6-year plan public hearing with the county. We will do that sometime this spring. I'd like to do it in April if that is agreeable to the board. I know you have a lot of other things going on with other public hearings and budgets and stuff like that, so I'll work with the county staff if that's okay. I won't hold you to a date right this second. But we do need before the end of this fiscal year, before the beginning of next fiscal year. And I think there will be some room to add a project or two to that. We're still working on Sydney Church Road. We got half of Sydney Church Road. We've got the center section of Yellow Sulphur on there. And those are the projects that are currently on the plan, but I think we'll probably have some room for one or two more. So we'll talk about scheduling that. So I can get a resolution from the board approving the plan, and we'll handle the public notices and the advertisements in the paper, and I'll get a draft plan as soon as we set a date for that. The only other thing I have is you may see in front of you a handout I gave. It's the Board of Supervisors. It's a portion of the Board of Supervisors manual. The entire manual is 84 pages, and I chose not to print 8 copies of that. I did print the table of contents, and it kind of shows you what we have there, and I'd be glad to provide. It's all online, and so I'd be glad. First of all, I'm glad to print one if you really want one, but I didn't want to print something that you wouldn't use or wouldn't need.
And we've actually, just to interrupt you, we've actually saved that into their drop boxes, the entire manual, so it's online on our site as well. So
good. The local assistance website, that's one of the local assistance is one of the divisions within DDOT, and they have a really, really good website. They do a lot of work with the counties directly, not through my office, but they help manage the revenue sharing program and a lot of other programs with the localities, and their website is a really good source of information about different things within DDOT. And the link to this manual is on their website. It's just been updated just slightly. There's a couple of other things that were added. I think they added a section on outdoor advertising. I think they added a little section on innovative intersections. There's a couple of little things in there. It's all very short, brief kind of stuff that you can go to for sort of a quick little bit of information on a topic. Of course, I'm available at any time if you'd like to send me an email or give me a call, and we'll help any of the board members work through any kind of policies or regulations that we have to work with. And that's all I have for my update. I'll be glad to take any questions.
I'll start off with Supervisor Fidzikowski.
Well, you picked the wrong one because I got several things.
That's okay.
How are you, Mr. Clark?
I'm doing fine.
Good. I've been getting a couple of calls, and if this is an issue I know you've been dealing with, and I don't know how far you've gotten with it, but on Boner's Run, the bridge that was rebuilt, as you remember, back in May of last year, there was a fire up there, and there's, I think, approximately 12 or 14 homes up there on the other side of the bridge, and it took them 5 tries to get the fire truck across because of the size of the bridge. And I'm sure when the new bridge was put in, there was probably some new updates and regulations. They got that rub rail down at the bottom and the guardrail on it, which makes it a tight squeeze. As the fire chief told me, he lost a little paint on that one. And I was just wondering if there was any kind of plan that you all are looking at, or is the bridge got to go, or
As
what?
far as I know, there's no plan for complete replacement of that yet. I can see when it would be. The last time that was done, it was just what we call a superstructure replacement. It was to replace the deck, but they did change the style of railing, because the other railing was very thin and probably non-standard railing that couldn't be used now. They have to use this guardrail, and it pushes in at the top a little more. It's no narrower at the bottom, but vehicles are a little wider at the top than their wheelbase, and it certainly gives the effect, and it is in effect narrower up about 3 feet higher.
I've noticed that you use the same piers on it. I was
Yes.
just wondering, is there any way to widen the deck using the same
No,
piers?
not on the same one. Not on the same thing, which causes it's the abutment and the widening of that, and it puts us into another category of environmental regulations when you're doing more than just replacing a deck.
And the big concern, of course, for all the folks that live up there, they're worried about what the next fire would bring if they're able to get any trucks across it. It's my understanding the only 2 trucks that were able to respond quickly were brush trucks, and they only carry like 500 gallons of water, which isn't enough to put out a house fire. But okay,
I can do a little more research to see if there's something that can be done with the railing. That's about all that can be done
Well,
until the whole thing is replaced.
I think the citizens up there are going to keep it a hot issue until something is resolved, but
Okay.
that's one item I had. Also I was wondering if you knew what the status of the bridge on Reese Mountain Road is. And the reason it's a concern is that this has been proposed as the route if an agreement with Roanoke County isn't reached over their trash train, which I'm hoping that will work out. But if it doesn't, I think the route is planned on using that bridge. And as far as I know, that bridge doesn't get inspected, as far as I know.
No, that bridge has quite a history. It was built for a private road. We got it built because when the interchange was put in, when 81 was put in, it cut off. It was a private road that hit North Fork Road. And so to maintain the access for that property, it required relocating that road. And at first it was an open ford, and then through other negotiations, VDOT agreed to build a bridge, but not to maintain the bridge. I don't know that there's any ownership to it other than it's on a public or it's on a prescriptive easement type of right-of-way, but it's not a right-of-way that's maintained by VDOT.
But it's been there since the interstate went through there.
Yes.
So it's
We're just
a
very
lot
shortly
of
after.
years.
Yes, it was probably done sometime in the mid-'70s.
And the last thing I got when I was talking to the fire chief, he was telling me they had several wrecks on North Fork Road in the vicinity of 4945 North Fork Road. Apparently the culverts are blocked up there, and even though we've enjoyed some warm weather lately, when the water runs over there and it refreezes, then they get all the accidents. But I thought I would just mention that to you if you could get somebody to look at that.
Sure.
That's it.
Supervisor DeMott.
I don't have any questions. Thanks so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Supervisor Biggs.
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Supervisor Bud.
So I was driving down Lester's Gate the other day and then driving down South Main Street another day. And I've noticed that like the ice and stuff is starting to break up the road almost completely. Like it's really gonna start busting. Is that something that VDOT would have done? Or would an outside contractor have laid that road back when it was laid? Meaning the last
last
cover.
overlay, well, most of our overlay is done by contractors, but
Okay.
it's done through, we make the schedule, put it out to bid to contractors.
Is there ever any opportunity to say, hey, you did a horrible job?
Probably not at once winter weather. is
Uh-huh.
done. They do tests on it when it's being put down. They do density tests, and there's an inspector there at the time. And that contract is over, and once it's passed, it's passed. Unless it can be proven that there was some kind of, if they didn't use the right mix, they didn't use what was supposed to be the right mix, if there's not enough asphalt in there, if they didn't use enough tack, it's very hard to prove.
It just seems to me that Lester's Gate, let alone South Main Street, and I know that's not our space, but they're just breaking up the same. It means to me that the process was similar.
What section of Lester's Gate are you?
So
Yeah.
from where you guys ended by Deercroft up to the cheese factory,
Okay,
you can just see it. It's all starting to break up.
okay.
That's all I have. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd.
I know I brought this up before. I had a call from one of the citizens that live on Bobcat Lane asking the question, why can't we get that paved? I sent him an email back and trying to explain that you were working on the unpaved roads, getting them paved at a slow pace, and that it was my understanding that most of them were based on population of importance. So,
If it's an unpaved road, it can be, the board can choose to put it on the 6-year plan, but typically the board, chooses the ones that have the highest traffic count.
right. So,
It has to have a minimum of 50 vehicles a day to use our unpaved road funds. The board can use revenue sharing funds, or there's just a few other ones, if it wouldn't be that expensive to pave something that's less than 50 vehicles a day.
okay.
But I can check the traffic count on that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Usually there's more than 6 or 7 residents on there, it'll get to 50 vehicles.
Well, he said there'd been some new houses built up there, and to be honest, I've not been up the road for a while.
Yeah.
But, okay. Thank you.
Supervisor King.
I just have 3 things. You know where we're at on the low water bridge on Fairview Church?
Waiting for funding still and design. It's still, I think that's the elements in the 6-year plan. I think I forgot that one. It is in the 6-year plan.
Okay. And you mentioned Brush Creek. When was you going to start that one?
That will probably be, it's going to be this, let's see, depending on weather, of course, it could be as early as June.
Okay. This year?
This year. It will be this year this time.
All right. And do you know where we're at on Meadow Creek about restricted tractor and trailers?
That is in the process. Currently, we're also working on Mount Tabor. We're going to get that one finished, and we'll have to set a public hearing for that one as well. We'll get that public hearing this spring.
All right. Thank you.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Clark. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Is there a motion to go into work session?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okay, hold on.
This is our 3rd meeting of board office.
Have you my motions?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Beck?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
All right.
Mr. Jakowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair Cook?
Aye.
7 ayes.
First item in work session is Dr. Meyer with Montgomery County Public Schools and 2018-2019 budget presentation.
Good evening, members of the board, Chairman Tuck, Mr. Meadows. Thanks for having me here tonight to present our school board's budget.
Is this the same one?
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Hello, Katie. Oh.
And Katie's given you a new copy of the budget. I think it was emailed to you as well last week. I'm going to go through much of what I went through at our work session a couple of weeks ago. And feel free to stop me at any point as I go through if you have questions. First thing I'd like to go over are accomplishments from last year's budget. We were able to give our employees a 2% raise. We were able to cover $1 million that was required of the school division and increase VRS contributions to the state. And that was a huge cost to us. We were able to increase our bandwidth, which is important as we continue to increase technology in the school division. We were able to adjust for inflation, which was something we had not been able to do in the past. And continuing reoccurring money for technology is something that we were able to accomplish. And then too, with the carryover money from the county, we were able to go back after the budget was passed and continue to do what we need to do in terms of technology to replace things such as smart boards, projectors, teacher classroom computers. Capital maintenance money was included there, and we were able to purchase 2 school buses. And I've talked to you before about the need to average 6 school buses a year to make sure that we do not have 1 year where we have to buy a lot of school buses. I believe it's coming up in a few years where technically if we were not doing this, we would have to replace a lot at one time. At some point in past history, we bought 22 in one year. I have no idea when we had that amount of money to buy 22 school buses, but that's not the case in recent time. Some other accomplishments, one from savings. Savings mostly for the school bus purchase. To get to the 8 school buses this past year, we were able to purchase 6 out of savings. And most of the savings comes from fuel savings. You know, we do budget in case that fuel prices go up. And actually, this is not a motivator for doing this, but it's about $10,000 a day in fuel. So every snow day, we bought a bus on snow days this year, and so that's the only good thing about a snow day. All right. So some other things we're able to accomplish after the budget was passed is in terms of lapse and turnover, and this is the money that is realized when we replace school staff. When folks retire and then we're hiring new staff, the budget's based on everyone coming back. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I mean, we have about 10% turnover every year. And so with that, we were able to complete our one-to-one initiative in grades 5 through 12. We were able to add a much-needed teacher at Charlottesville Middle School. We were able to look at actually a new gifted program that is really exciting with very little additional money. We're going to be able to increase our gifted services without hiring additional personnel, and so we're excited about that. We were able to expand robotics by only adding a half a teacher at Blacksburg High School and Christiansburg High School. We have a full program, all-day program at both of those schools in robotics that also Auburn and East Montgomery students also access. And then extracurricular activities, we're able to add a girls soccer program at East Mont High School, lacrosse at Blacksburg and Christiansburg, and middle school cross country. For very little money, we were able to pay stipends to coaches at 4 middle schools. And in the fall, there had been only 2 sports, and that was football and volleyball, and that's pretty limited. And adding cross country, we had 150 students that were out running this fall, and just had a great time doing that. Other accomplishments, we're able to add assistant principal at Price's Fork Elementary School, work-based learning coordinators. Work-based learning is something that is it's become sort of an unfunded mandate with new graduation requirements at our high schools, where students are expected to actually get some type of internship experience. And so with that, we've gone from 20 to over 300 students that are leaving the building every day to get these internship and work-based learning opportunities. And with that, we needed a staff member to keep up with who is actually leading the building every day. So we're able to add a supplement for that. Lead teachers in music and art for the division. This was something we had a half-time person doing this job that had to be cut in the past budget. We're able to pay a current full-time music and art teacher a supplement to do this as an additional duty. We had to add a teacher this past year at Kipps Elementary School for kindergarten. Kindergarten, it's a sort of, we hope not to get surprises every year, but we never know how many kids are really going to show up for kindergarten. And we sometimes do not know until the first day of school. And we had too many kids show up at Kipps Elementary this year for kindergarten, so we're able to add a teacher with that. And then two, we were able to add earth science as a high school science at our 4 middle schools. And this is something that it's been done pretty regularly, most school divisions across the state, especially top school divisions. And we were able to pay a current teacher to teach an extra period without adding additional staff. And in the first semester, these students took Science 8, and this semester they're taking a double block of Earth Science. And the first semester, the goal was to get the top kids into this program. We had a 100% pass rate first semester in Science 8, so we have the right kids in this program, so we're very excited about that. And then two, accomplishments from our capital funds, and this is, thanks to you and what you have done and the forward thinking in putting aside money for capital projects in our school division. We opened up the first small wing at Falling Branch Elementary School. We had, I believe, 8 or 9 trailers that are no longer there, where kids are being educated in trailers at Falling Branch. And so we were able to open up that first section, and they're continuing to build at Falling Branch. We will break ground on the first phase of Christiansburg High School projects mid-March with new athletic fields or upgraded athletic fields at Christiansburg High School. So we're excited about moving forward with that. Challenges. The per pupil spending is relatively high compared to other school divisions. The only school division in the area that's higher than us is Salem schools, and there are several reasons for that. In fact, you all asked. In fact, Chairman Tuck, you asked a question last time, and I talked about small schools, and I did misspeak. The comparison between educating a student at East Montgomery High School versus Blacksburg is 5,000 to 8,000. And did you get? Okay. Yeah. We've actually broken it down for every school.
Thank you.
And so you can see the biggest. Get it first before you can't see it. You get it. All right.
Thank you.
Probably the biggest difference is East Montgomery High School versus Blacksburg Middle School. You can see it's $8,000 per student versus Blacksburg Middle. It's $4,300 per student that we spend. So that is this is a comparison showing you, for the most part, our smaller schools do cost us. It costs us a lot of money, but that's okay. I mean, we have 4 distinct communities that want their schools, but it does cost more to educate our students. Something else too that I failed to mention, that you have to realize is our composite index is higher than many of these other school divisions, which require you to contribute more. And I think that's something that's different, where many of these other school divisions around us, their composite index is lower, so the local government does not have to contribute as much to the educational system because of the wealth. So that causes an imbalance as well. Challenges as well, enrollment. We're up about 250 students since 2010, and we're down about 50 teachers since 2010. And that has been challenging. Most school divisions, probably west of Charlottesville, enrollment is decreasing. We're actually increasing because people are moving here, and that is a good sign in terms of economic development. However, they bring students with them, and yes, we get more money from the state, but as you know, the state funding is not adequate. So we're seeing an uptick in enrollment. Another huge challenge we have in terms of recruiting new teachers is in terms of what we pay our first-year teachers. And I showed this to you last week in how we compare to Radford, Floyd, Pulaski, and Giles. The only school division that we pay more than in the first few years is Giles. Radford, all the way through 10 years of experience, they pay their teachers more than we do here in Montgomery County. Floyd and Pulaski, in those what I call recruiting years, pay more the first 3 to 4 years to their beginning teachers. So that's a challenge. And then too, in the past we had talked about benefits in terms of we have a good benefit package, and we do. So how does that compare? And when recruiting new teachers who usually have fewer than 5 years experience, we want to compare ourselves to other school divisions and how the insurance added up, and it still didn't add up. The only school division that we still can do better than is Giles through this chart here. And as you see, Floyd, if you include the benefits versus ours, the salary difference for a brand new teacher is $3,000. Next, a challenge that we have based on several years of teachers not getting raises is a compressed pay scale. In most school divisions, steps for teachers equals years of experience. And what happens when teachers don't get a raise, if you don't make adjustments, then you have teachers with 2 different years of experience on the same step. And that is a challenge to us when we're recruiting teachers. In fact, I've been giving this presentation to our schools, and a teacher at Auburn Middle School who was new last year basically said, yeah, this happened to me. I thought I was going to be on step 5, but then I was told we're 2 steps behind, so I was placed on step 3, and I didn't know that until I got my contract. Well, that's a communication problem on our end, for one. But you know, the norm across the state is that teachers get paid steps for years of experience. So what we did is we looked at where our employees, or rather our teachers, and what we found is that 47% were on the right step in comparison to their years experience, but over half were not. So getting that corrected is really important to us this coming school year. Additional challenges: we lost over $200,000 in federal funding this year. We have to estimate our federal funding for next year based on this year's funding. And so there's really no way to actually know that. And so we get into the school year this year and we find out we're about $222,000 less than what we thought we were going to receive from the federal government this year. And that's due to the new administration making cuts in title spending at the federal level. Also, our composite index changed. Our composite index went up, and that's a state funding formula. And when it goes up, what the state is saying is that there's more of an ability to pay by the local government. Now, you may not agree with that, but that's what they're telling us. And that in itself was about $500,000 loss that we would have received if it had been the same. This is based on the governor's projected budget, or the numbers we have in here now, okay? And so we would be seeing about $500,000 more. Right now, the governor has in the budget an additional $800,000 for schools. We would have been seeing about $1.3 million more if the composite index had not changed. And then too, the state, before Governor McAuliffe left office, he promised a 2% pay raise for state workers and teachers. And something that was not highlighted in the press is that we would not receive that money until December of 19, which is the budget I'll be presenting next year at this time to you. So there's no money in the state budget this year for that. And then, of course, insurance cost, it's something that happens every year. Maintaining our buildings, bus fleet, rising costs in terms of inflation. Inflation this year is 2%. So, technically anything less than a 2% raise that teachers get or our employees get would be a step backwards. Sustaining one-to-one technology, bandwidth is important. Middle school, the middle school model that's where we're short teachers are in our middle schools. We could stand to gain 20 teachers in our middle schools. We're one of the few divisions in the state that has a 6-period day for middle school. 6-period day costs less than a 7-period day. Most every school division in the state, they're on a 7-period day, or they're on some type of hybrid block that gives 7 to 8 periods. And so we reduced it during the recession to 6 periods. And the problem with that is the lack of electives for our students to take. And I mention this often to our folks that we have a lot of kids, like many school divisions, that struggle. And they'll take the 4 content areas, and in terms of math, science, English, and social studies. If a student is struggling, they'll get a remediation class. We actually were having students who have the 4 content, and then they go back to another math and go back to another English class. And so they spend 6 days in a core class with absolutely no types of electives. And so that's something that we feel is a huge problem, and we need to add teachers at some point in the future to help with that. Unfunded mandates, I talked about work-based learning earlier. The new diploma requirements for next year's 9th graders, there are new diploma requirements, and there's some things that are in the requirements that are basically unfunded mandates, things we have to do, and it will cost us more money. Computer literacy requirements is another unfunded mandate. And then two, one of the huge challenge we have in terms of teacher recruitment, a critical teacher shortage across the Commonwealth and actually across the nation. I mentioned to you that we went to a job fair in Salem a few weeks ago, and on the spot we offered 8 candidates a job, and 8 turned us down. And they were offered jobs because our folks thought they were great, and we want the best here, and they all turned us down. And so, and then of course the starting pay, it does matter. It does matter, and I've mentioned to you how there are several. The gold standard for teacher pay in this area would be Salem, and we have several carloads of folks who live in Blacksburg and Christiansburg who meet at the park and ride up here every morning, and they drive to Salem to teach. And I've spoken to them, many of them personally, and it has to do with several $100 more in their paycheck every month. The ideal budget scenario, if we were to try to start, not fix, but I think start to fix some of the issues that we're having in terms of lack of funding in the school division. One would be employee salary enhancements. This would be getting all the teachers in the right place. It would be competing with Rafford, where we would actually at least equal Rafford in the first 10 steps, boost our starting teacher pay, help our teachers on the end of the pay scale. That's another issue we have. Our steps stop at 30. Teachers are working longer than 30 years these days. I mean, teachers are they're getting out of school. If you get out of school at 22 or 23, not many folks are retiring at 53 these days. And so what's happened to our teachers at the top of the scale, they stopped getting raises. And so that's something too that we need to look at. Restoration of 14 positions, insurance costs that are estimated to go up. Although I will say, from the $765,000, we have not gotten a firm number, but we're down to around what I'm asking for in the budget, I do believe, which is around $500,000 increase now. So that was good news. We haven't seen it in writing yet, but that's what we're being told, and so that is something that's good. Health insurance for our bus drivers and our teacher aides. This is actually, I've been in 4 school divisions. This is the first school division I've been in where aides did not get the same benefits as teachers in terms of insurance. And then too, I've been in another school division where bus drivers got health insurance benefits. Bandwidth continues to be a cost that we need to continue to keep up with. Utility rate increase, this is just simply inflation. Our light bills go up just like mine do at my house, or and fuel prices go up, and that's just extra money for inflation. Wi-Fi for underprivileged students, this is something that we wanted to do. In fact, we're able to do some of it. We're really excited, but we just absolutely love the Education Foundation that's in this county. They do an absolutely wonderful job and help. In fact, they gave us $44,000 of teachers and grants this year, and that was just absolutely wonderful. And one of the grants was for this specific thing, Wi-Fi for underprivileged students, and we want to expand that. And what that is the students who do not have internet at home can actually check out from the library a jetpack and go home and actually use their computer and be online at home. So that's something that we would like to expand it. Materials and supplies, we seem to fall short there just about every year. Technology, equipment, vehicle replacement, the 8 school buses, capital maintenance. Capital maintenance, that's simply fixing the things that break during the year. That's really, really important. However, the school board's approved budget is not what you saw in terms of, we're not asking for $7.1 million, which is what I think we actually need. But then too, there's a realization through conversations with Mr. Meadows prior to this being developed, and even in the recent weeks, you do not have $7.1 million to give us an additional money. We understand that. And so, what we are asking for, the first salary enhancements of is close to $2 million. And what that would include is a 1.5% raise for our employees. It would correct the teacher steps. It would add one step to the teacher scale. In other words, it would go from 30 to 31. So basically, if you're at the top of the scale, you get the same 1.5% raise as everyone else. Our veteran teachers deserve the same raise as everyone else. And so that would be the salary enhancement. It would not come close to competing in the first 10 years with current Rafford. It would not catch up with Floyd or Pulaski with the proposed scale, but it would be a raise for our employees. This was good news. VRS contribution decreased by $340,000. After it went up $1 million last year, it went the other direction. So we were very excited when we received this number. So this is very, very helpful. Health insurance cost $500,000. And we're hoping this continues to go down, but we're hearing that we're in the ballpark now where the price for employees does not increase and there's no more coming out of their pockets. This would be our increase. Bandwidth increase, technology. It's important that we continue to increase our bandwidth. Computers are a necessity now in our schools. The state requires us to test on computers, and they have to run at a certain speed. And so it's important that we continue to upgrade this every year. Technology, equipment. These were things that were funded in your carryover last year, and this is just replacing broken technology. Chromebook. The state. This is picking up where the e-backpack program, which was a state program that has been stopped for this school year, and picks up, and this is basically replacing Chromebooks that have been broken, just a replacement cycle of the Chromebooks. In the one-to-one school buses, we need 8. I'm asking for 2, and we're hoping that we get the savings that we've seen this past year. Capital maintenance. This is maintenance. This is just to fix things that are broken, and this was something that was. This is something that needs to be a part of our regular budget because things do break every year, and so this was something that was in the carryover from last year, and so the total request was at $2.3 million, and it's actually from a couple of weeks ago. It's about 10,000 less than what you saw a couple of weeks ago. We actually saw a rise in our Perkins funding, which is a good thing, by about $10,000. That's a rise in federal government money by $10,000. Perkins funding, it funds our CTE programs from the federal level and all our career tech types of programs, and so that was that was a good thing. And so, questions?
I'll start off with Supervisor DeMotts.
I'm not used to being asked first.
Well, I'm trying to go on the new rotating basis, but at the same time, if you would like, I could pass you over and go to Supervisor and come back to you if you would like.
Yeah, I would like to reserve the ability to ask questions later. as you said, this presentation has already been given to us once, and we did have a robust discussion at that time. So I'm sure there might be more that comes out tonight, but right now I don't have any questions for you. Thank you.
Supervisor Biggs?
Right now, I'm okay.
Supervisor Bung?
I have a question about the handout that you gave us today, this one. So I see the cost per student, but you didn't really talk about the salaries, blue line. And so I see, if I'm reading this correctly, Blacksburg High School has the highest paid and Christiansburg High is the second highest paid salaries.
It's the amount of money going to that school for salaries. It sort of shows you the gap in what we spend per student there, because we do have more
Teachers, yeah.
So what you're seeing is the larger the school, the less it costs technically to run the school.
Even though you are paying you have more, is this reflecting you have more teachers, therefore you are paying
Correct.
more salaries? Okay.
Yes.
And that's all I have. Thank you for what you do.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Not at this time.
Supervisor King?
I'm glad to see you trying to get more buses. I mean, that's a big thing. We need to keep good buses. I was just wondering, you keep saying that other localities pay their teachers more. But if you look at Rafford, Floyd, how many schools have they built?
Oh, they haven't kept up. You're exactly right. And that is one, that makes a difference. Absolutely. We're keeping, and I think we're doing a good job of keeping up with our building needs in our county. And, in fact, some of the charts you see, the actual, next year you'll see Pulaski change and what they spend.
Oh, yeah.
You actually add debt service. You add debt service, we're spending a lot per student because we have nice buildings that the kids go to. And that cannot be underestimated. It is important that the facilities are up to date because you either pay now or you pay later. And so we're doing a great job, and you are doing a great job at helping us make sure that that's right. Pulaski's going to go up. You're going to see Salem go up. Roanoke County will go up. They're working on New Cave Springs High School or renovations there. There's some folks that are behind us. We were able to do some things during the recession years, which was not the case. And if I listened to other school divisions throughout the state, and they're way behind, and they're having a hard time now. So we've done a good job. So that makes a big difference. Absolutely.
I mean, that's just one thing we need to get out there too. And I understand, and I'm not just going to say teachers, you're employees of the school system.
Right.
They need raises. County employees need raises. You said you give your employees a 2% raise last year? County employees didn't get one last year, right?
We're working on it.
I know that. I said last year, they didn't get one. I mean, we're all in this together, and we're going to do the best we can.
Absolutely.
But as you know, new monies that we got coming in is 1.7, we think.
I understand that. Yes, sir. That's why I didn't ask for 7 million.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
I just wanted to thank you for not asking for 7.1 million.
Yes, sir.
Supervisor DeMont.
All right.
Coming back. I didn't know if there was any.
Well, I want to point out one thing. The difference in new revenue from the county, assuming our expenses are flat, and for the county side of things, we increased no expenses anywhere across the budget, and then we were able to fund this request. It represents, we have two methods for getting funding, raising taxes or raising fees, and this is close to about a 1 penny tax increase, and that's something that is kind of scary for us, and it's scary to think about for the county, and that is certainly not saying that I don't believe that your needs are justified, because I absolutely do. But this is going to be a very difficult budget year, I think, on both the school side and the county side. I really hope that we are able to fund what I view as a very reasonable request.
I've got to thank you. I've got a few things. One, thank you for clarifying. I get up and speak all the time, and sometimes you're thinking about numbers, and when we were talking about the cost of this per student, you threw out the best number you could, and then when you got the actuals, you fixed it. And thank you very much, because I've looked at that chart and I'm wondering, okay, how are we not getting, we're paying more, how are we not getting more money to our teachers? Because that is one of the most important. Obviously, we don't want roofs to be leaking and those type of things, but that's one of our important assets. This number will these figures will help me to get a better understanding of that, and I want to thank you for that. As far as a couple of citizens have approached me and said, have they looked at buying smaller buses, because there seems to be fewer and fewer kids who are riding the buses. And I know that you've got all the scheduling down, but citizens have asked me to ask you that question. So have you looked at that with the ridership, which appears to be down to some a passerby?
You know, I've heard that for years in other school divisions, the appearance of no kids on a bus, but it could vary as to the reasons why. And I'm not sure that the smaller bus costs.
And then we can't use them to rotate to suffer other buses.
Yeah, you know, you have to rotate buses. You know, we'll take buses on short routes one year, put them on longer routes one year. It could, you know, the riders could change. I mean, I know that a lot of buses, they're full. In fact, I get complaints at the beginning of the year of how full these buses are at times, and that's in every strand. And so, but that's a good thought, and we can look at it.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely. The answer is yes, we can look at that.
All right. One of the other things is we went down to Richmond and said, please, more.
We did that too.
Yes, we even said pretty please.
Yes.
We were really nice about it.
And I will say that we even took some of our legislators out to dinner and tried to talk with us more. And we got, at least some of the conversations I had were very concerning to me, that there will probably be 3 budgets that may be battled around down there, and the government's budget is only one of which.
Right, absolutely.
And there may be, because of, there's initial savings in Medicare of $450 million. The governor's budget takes that $450 million and doesn't reserve it and puts it throughout the budget in a lot of different places. The next year for Medicare costs go up, and instead of $450 million savings, there's going to be additional costs put into that, and then additional costs on top of that the following year. And so one of the things I was hearing is that there's at least some of the legislators are very concerned about that budget because it's short-sighted. Instead of taking that $450 and putting it aside to pay those bills, do you know how much that would be, or have any ideas? Have you heard about that $860 and whether that's going to go down, middle? And I'm asking you to look into your crystal ball like we are.
Katie, do you have any idea? If Katie doesn't know, I do.
Okay. And to the point, I've heard that they may walk away from each other for a while and not have a budget. We've had that happen before in Virginia for a while. Are you hearing some of those same things, that they may walk away from each other for a little while?
I have not. I've spent, in fact, I spent time on the phone this morning talking to one of our delegates there, trying to keep them just from simply passing unfunded mandates things that will cost us more money. There are 300 education bills that we went through every education bill, and we sent feedback to our representatives there. And in fact, we got a call this morning from one who actually wanted to know what we thought, which was really nice to actually have that. But so we're trying to keep up with those unfunded mandates and trying to keep that from going through. But the big picture of what's happening there now.
And we're also on this side, we've done a fee study, and we're looking at adjusting some of our fees. I think we mentioned at our joint session, we're getting an additional, you're getting, for the school side, about $860. We're getting $16,000 from the state to take care of the constitutional officers and increase spending, which obviously that doesn't even get anywhere close to inflation or anything like that. Sure. So we're looking at fees because we haven't raised our fees, and that's an area that we may be able to agree on, maybe not. I know it depends. There may be some agreement on the board, maybe some not. We're looking at trying to streamline government, and that being a possibility, but that's something that's going to be several years down the road. But we're also looking on our side of things about where we can make some cost savings as well. I greatly appreciate you coming and giving us information. I also extend an invite, which has been traditional, after the county administrator presents his budget, to come back and talk with our board about the impact that may have on your board and the schools. Did that promote any other, or cause anyone else to have any other questions?
I have a question, but I do have a comment. I think that it's particularly important that you concentrate on the teachers' salaries because, you know, during the building process, you know, I always say that the teachers paid for buildings because we were unable to put into our operating budget on both sides, county and schools. And so I'm really glad to see the emphasis on trying to do something. The salary scale, to my knowledge, since I first worked in the county in 1978, was never in sync for teachers, ever.
It's never what?
In sync. There was always a problem somewhere along the way. So it would be great if it could be straightened out and then people could also get their raise there because I know how hard they work and I also know how much money they spend on their classrooms. Right. So I'm glad to see that this has been discussed at 2 meetings now, and I think that it's sort of educational for the public to know. I know a lot of people do know, but I think it's never a bad thing to repeat it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And our priority will be to fix the teacher pay scale to where at least it fix it not to where the pay is equal to, say, Rafford,
right?
But to at least fix it to separate years of experience so there's not that confusion. So,
any other questions? Dr. Meyer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is alternative form of county government, and I believe the first folks we have up is the head of or a spokesperson on behalf of the Commissioner of Revenue Association.
I believe it's...
And I may mispronounce your last name. Is it?
It's Reagan.
Reagan. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Different spelling, same pronunciation. Very limited. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to finally meet you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. And if I forget to mention it during the course of the presentation, the little clip drive you have on your will have all the information that I'm going to present to you this evening, as well as some other background reference documents that I'll talk about during the presentation. So good evening, Chairman Tuck and members of the board. Mr. Meadows, thank you so much for the invitation to address you this evening.
Absolutely.
I'm Maggie Reagan, and I'm Commissioner of Revenue for the City of Stanton, and also serving as the volunteer president of the Commissioners of Revenue Association for this year. I'd also like to recognize my colleagues from the Commissioners of Revenue and Treasurer who are here also this evening in support and to lend their expertise. Whoa. Thank you all for coming. I don't have to be the only person in the room. In the process of your deliberations, back, I think all the way back to September, Chairman Tuck, you had talked about 4 different sort of pieces of information that you wanted to gather for the board in order to move forward in this discussion. The first of which was the legal process, and I believe Mr. McMahon has talked with you all about petitions and referenda and dates and elections and all that sort of thing, so I don't intend to address that. Secondly, about any particular efficiencies that you might be able to achieve, how the human resources aspect would be addressed, and then finally what the cost of moving forward with this consideration would be, and certainly your Mr. Meadows and his staff will address that issue. So I'm going to limit my presentation to talking about a little bit of background information and to further talk about a few of the questions that I have heard you all touch on over the past few presentations. In background, there are elected constitutional officers, Commissioner of Revenue and Treasurer, in 36 cities and 91 counties throughout the Commonwealth. There are 6 localities who have an alternate form of government and do not have elected commissioners and treasurers, and those are the cities of Alexandria and Richmond, as well as the counties of Albemarle, Fairfax, Prince William, and Henrico. The most recent of which, I tried to tie down dates for all those, and I was really unable to do so because there are not a whole lot of folks left around that know when all of these things came about. But it's my understanding that the most recent was Albemarle, and that was dated back to 1984. Some of the more recent changes in other localities that I was able to unearth, in 1973, it appears that Roanoke County citizens voted to adopt their alternative form of government. They did, at that time, eliminate the commissioner and treasurer offices, and then a few years later brought those offices back at the request of their citizens. In 2004, the city of Colonial Heights voted against a change in their form, and in 2010, the citizens of Manassas Park also voted against the change in their form of government. I wanted to touch on Loudoun County. Some of your discussions were about really what some of the more progressive counties are doing, and I don't think that any of us could consider Loudoun County anything but progressive. They are really one of the largest growing localities in Virginia, and so I wanted to touch on their County Government Reform Commission. This was a group that was formed in 2012 to study a lot of different aspects of county government in Loudoun. They presented extensive reports. I put a little bit of background information on your clip drives about that, just as it has to relate to the assessment process. There's a lot of information. You can find it on their website if you want to follow up and learn more about it. But one of the recommendations that they made to their Board of Supervisors was to move the assessment function for real estate from an independent assessment office back into the Commissioner of Revenue's office. And the reasons that they stated for that were good governance, accountability to the tax-paying citizens, prominence of that function as it related to the county, consolidation of record keeping, consolidation of governmental interface, cost elimination, and additional cost recovery from the Commonwealth. So I thought it was important to provide that information. They have since moved that office back into the Commissioner of Revenue's office and integrated it successfully. The Compensation Board. There was some information presented in a prior presentation to you all about this topic that I wanted to delve a little bit further into and maybe provide a little bit more information about. And the Comp Board being one of those things. Part of what the Comp Board does is determine the number of full-time equivalent positions that are based on the quantifiable staffing standards that we have developed, our association has developed in concert with the Comp Board, and we submit those workload measures annually for our budget during part of our budgeting process. There are 50 workload measures that directly impact by work done with commissioners and treasurers on behalf of the state. So the point being basically that the workload measures and the Compensation Board full-time equivalent positions are not designed to address work that's done solely on behalf of the county. So when we talk about your county's decision to prorate personal property tax for automobiles, that's not covered in the Comp Board standards. When we talk about auditing work for businesses and business personal property, that's not considered in your Comp Board standards. So they're really looking at work that the commissioners and treasurers and their deputies are doing that affect directly the revenues to the state. They don't monitor or oversee our work product. That is not part of their position, and they don't really disseminate expertise or evaluate our offices. So we sort of worked with the Comp Board many, many years ago, way before my tenure, to create a career development program. And that career development program was developed by the Commissioners of Revenue Association and is used by the compensation board to certify salary supplements for both the principal officers and their deputies based on their certification in that career development program. They do not consider those salary supplements available for Director of Finance offices. And the proposed plan that the compensation board put forth for a combined Director of Finance office for Montgomery County, which is also part of the documentation that I provided to you, does eliminate both the 2 principal officers and 6 of the unfunded deputy positions. Your proposed plan also includes adding a Director of Finance position at the same salary as one of your current constitutional officers and a Chief Deputy position at 90% of that current officer's salary. The difference being that that compensation board reimbursement would only be at 50% of that 90%. So that's really where the bulk of that $74,661 that the county would lose from the compensation board comes. The rest of it would be in the reimbursement for your benefits and your career development program supplements. That spreadsheet that looks at how many full-time equivalent positions they would consider to be necessary for your Director of Finance office does not necessarily reflect a true picture of how many people you would need to have in those offices, going back to that additional work that some of those deputies are doing specifically on behalf of the county and not on behalf of the state. In addition, you also will have a consideration of whether or not you want to create an independent office of assessment outside of the Director of Finance, and just want to make sure that that information is offered to you, that the compensation board does not reimburse for positions if that was the choice that you made. The career development program that we've designed is executed and managed by our association. The purpose of it is to educate and develop best practices. We currently have 70 certified master commissioners and 265 certified master deputies, with more enrolled and participating in the program. That program is open to all commissioner revenue offices. The treasurers also have a program that's similar, and also to the directors of finance and their staff. Albemarle County, Henrico, Richmond, and Fairfax regularly participate in that program and have deputies that are certified in that program. In fact, our Deputy of the Year last year was from Albemarle County. I want to talk a little bit about cooperation. Your citizens have the right to expect cooperation amongst all elected officials in your locality. And I want to talk a little bit about MOUs. I know that you all probably use them. I have not specifically asked your constitutional offices what MOUs they have, but I just wanted to put forth some examples that may be in use or that may be considered for future use. Most or many localities have MOUs with their constitutional officers so that they can cover employees in the human resources plans, in county pay plans, city pay plans. For example, the MOU that I have with the city of Stanton covers all of those aspects. So if I have an opening, I use the human resources office to fill it. If they participate in the county pay plan, we have same office hours as the county. Everything is basically done through the county, punch and time clocks and all included. Really no differences. So, I think that provides a level of stability for our staff so that they don't feel that sense of detachment from the rest of the locality. MOUs between the commissioners and treasurers for cross-training. This is something that is a possibility. I don't know if anybody has considered it in Montgomery County, but your commissioner and treasurer can have an MOU to provide for cross-training of their employees if they need to. It's mentioned often when we have conversations with boards and councils that either one or the other office seems to get really super busy, and it's usually December 5th for all those folks who wait till the last day to make their tax payments. And so we have those kinds of cooperative agreements where we have, usually it's a person from the commissioner's office that's cross-trained in accepting payments at the treasurer's office so they can jump into action and help them to accept payments to keep those lines down. And we do that. That's possible. MOUs between officers and county management or city management in order to share aggregated financial information. I have an MOU, and I know of several other commissioners that have MOUs where they need to provide information to boards, to directors of finance for budgeting and for trending information, and where your economic development people need some aggregated information on your business and industry so that they know what are we trying to do, what are we trying to achieve, what are we looking to bring to our locality. It's hard for them to budget and understand what the county is doing as a whole without that information. So we can put together those MOUs to provide that information without violating the confidentiality of our businesses and our business citizens. And then finally, MOUs to agree on locality audit procedures. We are all audited by the Auditor of Public Accounts, but that really relates just to state income tax. So a lot of localities have an MOU with an outside auditor that the county might bring in to audit our offices to make sure that everything is intact, and we can always set those up. And we also have, I personally have an MOU with our software company that we use because they have access to confidential information. And so those are just some of the types of cooperative agreements we can set up. Talking about citizen service. You mentioned in the presentation with your travel and tourism folks, and I see from entering your building, they have a desk right there. For a lot of constitutional officers, commissioner and treasurers, we're at that entry point to the office building. I probably get more questions asked about how to replace recycling bins than I do about taxes, frankly. So, we really consider ourselves the front door to your community and the information desk for a lot of citizens. State income tax preparation is really big for your citizens. Some of the changes in conformity laws this year are probably going to make a big change for commissioners. In that realm, we don't know yet. But directors of finance are not required to provide that service to your citizens. I will tell you that the citizens value that service and they want that service. Generally, when we're preparing tax returns for citizens, they're for the citizens that most need that help. And of course, we are sworn to confidentiality, as would I would believe, any employee who's working with confidential information, but it is part of our sworn duty as constitutional officers. So what are our arguments for remaining independent? Government works best when it's closest to the people and is accountable to them. We feel that the citizens should be able to elect who they believe are most qualified to carry out the functions of government, whether it be constitutional offices or our governing boards. And I think that it's unlikely. I felt that one of your previous presenters indicated that they didn't feel that the electorate was necessarily in possession of the competence to elect the right people to be your constitutional officers, and I would be remiss if I didn't say I disagree with that. Any change in the form of government, we feel, should arise from your electorate. Talking about a basic building block, the segregation of duties. And this is where we think this is a critical function between your commissioners of revenue and your treasurers, is that separation of duties that basically follows the premise of checks and balances. The same person who writes the check is not the person who signs the check. Business in 101, you all know that. And that's what we provide to your locality. So it protects the taxpayers, but it protects the locality too, because it gives your taxpayers the comfort that they have received an equitable tax assessment. When the tax assessment is not in the same hands as the person who sets the tax rate. That's really the importance of that separation of duties. Some of the residual concerns that I'd like to address that I've heard over the past couple of months, some of you ask. Can these functions be carried out with fewer people if you combine these two offices? I would say that it's not likely, and I believe that if you examine some of the evidence from those offices that have combined, you really still need those two functions. If you look at Albemarle County or you look at Henrico County, they still have assessment folks who just do that and collection folks who just do that. Yes, there's a little bit of cross-training, but it's really not to the level of where you have every employee in those offices knowing how to do all the different functions, because quite frankly, that would be very disruptive to the workplace for everybody to have to jump around to different jobs all the time. So there is some cross-training done, but I've already presented to you that there's an avenue for you to do that without changing your form of government. Possible increased salary expense. I believe that, first of all, if you change your form of government, you will lose the career development salary supplements that are provided through the state with the compensation board. And then also, you may need to have additional folks because your full-time equivalents are not going to necessarily match up with what the compensation board is saying that you need. And I don't know where you are in the level of salary parity with current county employees in that Department of Finance, or how that would all work out. But there is a possibility that you would need to increase salaries there. The question of whether or not it is a better idea for retention of employees, I can tell you that there are similar rates of attrition. That's something that we track, and there are similar rates of attrition among offices that have directors of finance as well as independent constitutional officers. So what are some of the opportunities that we have? Number one, better communication between departments. That is something we all can do a better job of. What information is needed to better serve the community? So if your board needs more information from your constitutional officers, that needs to happen. If your county management needs more information from your constitutional officers, that needs to happen. We need to facilitate that going on. If there is anybody in the building, frankly, who's sitting around saying, gee, I wish I knew, we ought to be able to fix that. So that's an opportunity. Preservation of leadership. There was a mention of the possibility of leadership in your constitutional offices changing every 4 years. Well, I would submit that a regular and purposeful dialogue between your constitutional officers, your management, and your board would be able to reduce that likelihood. And finally, investing in training, technology, and innovation. You've certainly heard from your school board that that's what they need to do for their students. And I think that you can agree that that's what needs to be done for county staff as well. The more you invest in the tools to help everyone do their jobs, the better job they can do. I work on the same software system as Montgomery County does, so I know there are challenges sometimes, and they never want to provide you with anything else free of charge. Earn it, even as much as we ask, but really that's what we need to provide for folks in order to do a better job, to be able to innovate and provide better service to your citizens. So in order to get the best effort from the right people, we need to do our job. Now, I would be remiss if I did not have a discussion of government and leave you with a quote from the Virginia gentleman. So, Thomas Jefferson, I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform them, to inform their discretion. Now, if we ask the taxpayers, they might want it to go a little more like this. Giving money and power to government is like giving whiskey and car keys to teenage boys. Thank you, and I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
I'll start off with Supervisor Biggs.
I don't have any questions right now, but I will make a comment. I learned a lot of things I didn't even know, especially about the reimbursement. And something that really fascinates me, two of the things you said about having memos of understanding and being able to, everyone should be able to work together, like the treasurer, the commissioner, the board, and the administration. And I think that might be one of the things that we here in Montgomery County could really, really benefit from. I think that would really help the situation immensely. Are there ways to find, here's a question, are there ways to find samples of these memos of understandings?
I will email them to you. I'll be happy to. I provided you with my contact information on the back of the brochure there. Certainly any questions that come up at a later time, I have multiples of those because they're part of our one of our career development classes. We have samples of those MOUs between for employees and also for economic development. That's one of the questions that we get asked quite frequently is how do we share information that we have without not sharing what we can't, you know, and we can help you, you know, absolutely.
And are there examples of localities that you know of where people actually sit down and try to understand each other's jobs?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really the crux of a lot of what needs to go on, I think. And I'm not specifically, you know, indicating Montgomery County has a big problem with that, but it's really important. You know, two times a month. I'm included in the management meetings for my locality. It's very important to me because I need to know there's a sewer project going on, and you know, economic development's out here trying to get another brewery in town, and you know, the rec department's trying to find a way to light their horseshoe pits, which the director of finance always tells them everybody just turns their car and points their headlights at them. That doesn't, they still ask year after year. But those types of things are important for everybody to me. So yes, it's really imperative that we all get together and get in a room and understand what each other's push-pull are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Bowman?
On that same point, let's say 10 years from now, let's say nothing ever happens right now and we don't pursue this, but let's say 10 years from now, one of those two constitutional officers is in their silo and they're not forced to have memorandums of understanding. Is that possible? Meaning they don't have to work, they don't have to play in other people's sandboxes, or are they forced?
Well, they're not necessarily forced. There are different levels of pressure that can be imparted, I would argue. I think that, well, first of all, you do have the option of every 4 years replacing them. And I know that sometimes it's hard from your side of the dais to say, you know, how do we find that right person who's going to work with us and who's going to do a good job? I was recruited by the city council in my locality. So, you know, of course there's that opportunity. And no, I mean, the answer is no. You cannot go and force that person to come out of their silo. But you can
cajole,
you can try to lasso them in, and you know, and you know, when you're the last person who's not playing well in the sandbox, you know, that kind of says something, I think, to a lot of folks.
I'm just going to look through my notes here. Hold on a second. So you talked about Loudoun County and how the assessment office or department went back under the Commissioner of Revenue. So in their instance, they still have the Treasurer and Commissioner of Revenue. They never got rid of them.
That's correct. They did take the real estate assessment function out of the Commissioner's office about 30 years ago and have had that as a separate and distinct assessment office. And then that recommendation was made to them that it be put back and consolidated back into the Commissioner of Revenue for better service to the citizens. And specifically because they did not believe that would diminish in any way the professionalism of the department and the prominence of the function.
So Marty, and you might know the answer, Maggie, does that require, if moving the assessment part of the department out, does that require a change of government? Or is that?
You wouldn't be getting rid of your Commissioner of Revenue's office. You would just you'd be creating a separate assessing department. I don't know how we would do that. I have to look at that.
And Sarah, 4 years ago, we did a reassessment that was done outside. We spent about $600,000 doing that reassessment 4 years ago. So we're getting ready to spend $600,000.
I see.
And we did it outsourced. We did not.
We don't have.
Chris, I think what she's talking about is actually creating a
reassessment office.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
When we go outside, they're doing that for the commissioner.
Right. So we're going
in the
outside.
fact that if you did change your form of government, you could it's also allowed for you to move the assessment function out of that office as well, the Director of Finance office, and create an independent assessment office that answers directly to the board. So it's just a difference in the organization chart, basically.
Okay. Do you have any ideas of how, and this goes back to my first question, how we highly encourage everybody to play happy? And I'm not saying we don't play happily. I'm just saying, what do we do, or what are the things that the county can do to help with memorandums of understanding and things like that?
I mean, I really think that the start of that is just communication, you know, and I guess if I'm going to be frank about it, how often do you visit with your commissioner or your treasurer, or do you call a meeting with some of your colleagues? And I know there are all kinds of rules about how many of you can meet in a room at the same time. I don't really understand all of that, but you know, if you break up into different groups and set an agenda and say, you know, we'd like to understand your process, or you know, tell us how you do. You know, how motor vehicle assessments work. You know, it's got to start somewhere, and it's got to start with a conversation. And that's really, you know, sort of the, you know, it's not going to work if it's just a, you know, give us this, or, you know, we want it. It has to be organic, in my opinion. And I know that it doesn't help the current situation today, but as an association, what we do when we have elections every 2 years, so we have county elections and then city elections, as the leadership of the organization, for example, we had 8 new elected commissioners this past election season, and so I assigned a senior commissioner as a mentor to each one of those people. And then they have sort of a work plan as a mentor. This is what we want you to help them understand. And we do also do that through our training. We do have an opportunity for a couple days worth of training when new officers come in. And that is part of what we talk to them about, is get in there and establish a good relationship with your board or council right off the bat. It's not going to work if you don't.
You mentioned how you all help people with their state income tax. For the city of Stanton, how many does your department or office do per year?
I
would
really
you say?
don't know. I think we did somewhere around 3,500 last year, but don't hold me to that number. Now, that includes not only the folks who come in to get assistance with their returns, but folks who mail their returns and we process them. So if you send your return to us on a paper return, and there are still plenty of people who do paper returns, we still do go through every one to make sure it's correct before we file that within the state system. And that's usually where we find errors for folks and call them up and say, hey, guess what? You know, we saved you some money, come back and sign that. They're always very happy about that. Yes, the number of state income taxes being prepared locally and assistance locally is dwindling. It really is. There's no question about that. People are being pushed towards online filing, and we totally understand that. But we still do help those folks, and they're really the folks that need the most help.
So that's not a requirement of your office?
We are required by the state to accept the return for every taxpayer in the locality.
But not help them with their...
We are not required to assist them in preparing. That's a service that we offer, yes. And some of our offices do federal as well, but I don't.
And you mentioned, like you did just right now, you do that, and most of the people that ask for your help are the people that need it the most. So of the 3,500, about how many of those are the people that really need that help? And if we didn't have it available, where would they go? Who would fill that
Generally,
need?
what the process is that these are folks who will go and they will have their federal tax return done at one of the services, the H&R Blocks and Liberty Tax, that sort of thing. But they know that they have to pay for the service if they get their state done there. And if they come to our office, they don't have to pay. So usually they've had their taxes done there and they slide over to our office and have them do it. I really don't honestly know the numbers. I don't
Would you say
keep that.
80% of everybody that you?
Oh, no, it's a much lower number than that.
Oh, okay.
And it really varies by
Interesting.
locality. Some localities have a lot more people. The ones who provide the federal service get a lot more folks than the ones who just provide the state service. I'd say it's a much smaller percentage.
And you all don't get compensated for all that help that you're providing?
Well, it's part of what the comp board, that's part of our workload measures.
But you're
is the
going
number
above
of
and
state-
beyond what the comp board,
That's
right? Okay.
Right, yeah.
I just
that's-
wanted to make sure.
I mean, that's the level of service that
Right.
that we expect ourselves to provide.
Pretty fantastic. You had, either on your last slide or the previous slide, you had a bullet point saying preservation of leadership. I didn't understand the context exactly that you were talking about with it.
It really was in reference to a previous presentation that you had that I heard the presenter say that there was a potential that you would lose your constitutional officer every 4 years and there would be no continuity in that leadership in that office. So, that's a double-edged sword. If they're not doing their job and they're not communicating and not really doing what you want them to do, then that may be a good thing. But it's not necessarily there are opportunities to keep employees from having an unsettled feeling about whether or not their jobs are secure when there is a change of leadership. And that's really what I was trying to address, because there was some reference made to another constitutional office where somebody was elected and immediately staff were, it was that sort of serve at the pleasure of the officer type. And I was really trying to get at the fact that that doesn't necessarily need to happen.
That's all I have. Thank you for what you're doing.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Shepherd.
I don't have any questions. That was a very enlightening presentation. And I did learn some things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor King.
I don't have no question, but I do appreciate you coming up here, and very enlightening. I mean,
Thank you.
every time.
I enjoyed being here. It's been a long time since I've been to Christiansburg.
Well, you was sitting here earlier when we was talking about motels and all. I hope you spend some of that Stanton money here.
There are lots of hotel rooms in Christiansburg tonight, so we're helping out your tourism folks.
There you go. Thank you.
Supervisor Fichkowski.
So it's your position then that you feel that these elected offices are more responsive if every 1 to 4 years the citizens either elect them or reject them than a financial director who gets a walk-in visit from the county executive and says, you need to fix this.
Well, certainly we feel that the response that we have is to your citizens and not necessarily to a single supervisor. And the fact that we can be essentially removed from office every 4 years for not doing our job and not being responsible to all 94,000 citizens, as opposed to just being responsive to one supervisor, is our belief that is a better system. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor DeMonts.
First, as the mother of a teenage boy, your last quote really resonated with me. And I don't really have questions for you so much as a comment. First of all, the presentation was very enlightening, and I learned a lot just in what you presented tonight. And we've been studying this since October. It's clear that you've also watched our meetings where we've discussed this.
And thank you for putting those on YouTube. I would have driven down here every month, but it was great.
Well, we're better than Hulu or Netflix.
Yes.
More entertaining.
And cheaper, yes. And so you've probably heard me say several times that I have some real reservations with separating the citizen's voice from the assessment and collection of taxes. And I think there was a lot in your presentation that really reiterated that position in myself. So thank you very much for coming tonight. Thanks for the education and for contributing to the discussion that we're having.
Thank you.
I've got a few, and so bear with me here.
Sure.
And I want to make sure I understood this. The memorandums of understanding that Supervisor Biggs has been talking about, is that just a new thing tonight, or have that been in existence for years, those memorandums?
Well, I think there are commissioners throughout the state. Some of the examples that I have, depending on whether you're talking about with employees or whether you're talking about with county staff in terms of director of finance.
You
and
had
economic
mentioned
development or
cross-training.
Cross-training. There are offices that have had those for.
And we actually do have basic memorandums of understanding with the constitutional officers that say they'll follow the county's pay and classification system, compensation plan and all that, but they're very basic. They don't get into the level of detail that you were discussing.
And so if you're looking at really specifically for the cross-training aspect, and like I said, we use the same software that you all do. So I have one person in my office who is trained that can go and operate the cashiering module on the treasurer side if they have a need. So that, you know, when they have a bottleneck with citizens, that person can simply physically jump over to that office and perform that function. But they are specifically limited to the information that's accessible to them, and that it's permission-based in the software. So if they need that help, that permission will be granted, and then it will be revoked.
Okay, and so my
sense?
question is, I guess, those have been out there on your listserv for decades?
Not on the listserv that I know of, but I do have some examples of it that I'd be happy to share.
And y'all have training that talks about those memorandums of understanding?
We sure do.
And so, to your knowledge, there are no memorandums of understanding here in Montgomery County between our treasurer to do those types of activities that you've just discussed?
I don't know. I have not asked your officers specifically if they have MOUs.
Where they're cross-trained to go across the hallway, those type things. And so, is this something that you talk with our Commissioner of Revenue and our Treasurer to say, hey, look, you guys need to sign some of these memorandums of understanding?
I have not spoken with your treasurer personally. We have not had a conversation at all. I've had multiple conversations with your commissioner, and I think she's very open to.
I'd agree. I met with her. You had mentioned communication. I think she and I probably met 4 or 5 times on this issue, and then throughout proration, I think numerous supervisors met with her. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if she met 20 times with the supervisors when we were going through the proration process. And her door was open, and we worked very well together in regards to that issue. You had mentioned reassessments, and you were talking about savings in your presentation. Were you aware that we spend about $600,000 every 4 years to do that independently of our Commissioner of Revenue?
I'm aware that the function is subcontracted, yes, and that the employees who specifically deal with real estate in the Commissioner's office are dealing with new construction assessments and maps and deeds and that sort of thing, yes.
Now, I noticed you also quoted Jefferson, and one of the things was trust your citizens. This, if we pass this referendum, isn't it up to the citizens, not this board, to decide whether it's the right thing to do?
Yes.
And so isn't that, in fact, trusting our citizens to make an informed decision?
That is exactly what the point I was trying to get to, is to trust them to
trust them
that ballot for that.
One way or the other, to give them the opportunity to say whether they want to change of government or not.
Right.
And now, towns...
It has to be their decision anyway.
Right. The bottom line is it's theirs.
Right.
We would vote on whether the referendum goes out and is put on the ballot, but after that, we can't advocate for it, as I understand from Marty. We can inform, but that's it. So it would truly be our citizens making that decision.
Right.
Now, you had mentioned a couple of other things. Towns, we have 2 of the largest towns in Virginia. They don't have Commissioner of Revenue or Treasurer's offices, correct?
Some do.
Or elected?
I think there are a couple of examples, but I really cannot speak to that because I don't have any towns and I really haven't studied that.
Right.
I believe
Would you be
that there is
surprised?
a commissioner in Galax, but not a treasurer.
Galax is
I think.
actually a city.
It is a city, okay, all right, so I'm wrong on that point, but I really don't have the information on towns, I don't deal.
So towns do similar where you're talking about, but they handled their treasurer and their revenue all under one house. And those citizens vote on town councils and mayors to make those decisions. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I have not studied any government forms as far as towns are concerned. The only town I've ever worked with were the towns in Orange County when I helped them with some software issues. And I know that their assessments were done by the Commissioner of Revenue for that county, but I don't know how they actually have their offices set up.
And I know we were talking about our current situation. Were you aware that our treasurer has made presentations to us saying he needs 4 new employees, and actually the Commissioner of Revenue, he said she needed 4 employees. She said she needed 1, and it turns out she was right.
And he was probably referring to the compensation board positions, which there's a spreadsheet that I provided for you that they provided to me that represents what positions are unfunded right now in both offices, and I know there are 4 positions that are unfunded in the treasurer's office, but I don't know how that relates to actually what the need in the office is.
And as far as how many days under the Virginia Code does the Commissioner of Revenue have to be at work?
I don't think there's a requirement at all.
So if I won, and I'm not, Helen is there on a regular basis, not saying that, but let's say I won Commissioner of Revenue. I could decide not to show up for work for 4 years. And then just not get reelected.
Certainly disagree with that and hope that you didn't get reelected.
But that is a genuine possibility, isn't it?
I don't think there's a specific requirement for attendance laid out, but you can't do the job if you're not there every day.
Right. I'd agree with that. Now, there's some jobs that do require, I think the clerk of the court has to be there 4 days a year, opening day of term. It's in the code. In regards to those things, but no other constitutional officer has to show up to work.
I don't think there's a requirement.
So no other, going to Mr. Fijikowski's question, nobody's there to say, are you there? How many days of vacation did you take? And those type of things.
No, that's not a requirement. I mean, that's just basic common sense that, we're elected to do a job and we're going to do it. I don't think that it has worked since the 1870s without there being, some level of people accepting the responsibility for the positions.
And I know that we talked about, and Dr. Holt talked about a lot of different things. I think there were 11 initial officers that you voted on at one point in time, all the way up through the 1860s, and some of them, I think it was the Poor Society or the Poor Man's Poorhouse, someone over that, to all sorts of different things, and then those have been consolidated. So as far as that really changed in the 18th, that was right by Dr. Holt that changed roughly in the 1870s, 1880s.
I don't know. I mean, I do recall that in her presentation that she mentioned that I think it was up to 13 offices that were elected at some point in time, and some of those had been done away with based on societal changes. I don't think taxes, I think taxes and death are the 2 things we're never going to be able to avoid, so I don't guess those will ever be societal changes. But there was, she did, and you did ask her to provide history, so that was, definitely part of her presentation.
Well, listen, does that spur any other additional questions from any other?
In your presentation, and I wrote it down word for word, any change in the form of government should rise from the electorate. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
I just feel that if the folks in your county are not dissatisfied and have not come to you en masse and said, hey, we don't like this, we know you have the opportunity and the ability to change it, and we'd like to see how that could work, then I don't know why you would want to present it to them. That's my honest opinion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I was just going to ask the same thing April did, so thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very, very much for coming.
You are
I
very
appreciate
welcome.
your presentation, and I know that we have someone from the treasurer's office as well.
Yes, you do.
Ms. Powers, I believe, from the city of Roanoke.
Yes, thank you again. I appreciate your invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
That does not look like Evelyn Powers.
Maybe there's been a change.
More ways than one. We were expecting Miss Powers, and so I didn't know that we had been told she was coming. Thank you very much. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay. All right, shake that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, county administration, my name is Kevin Hutchins.
I was misinformed, and I apologize to you.
I was too, so I'm sorry.
And so obviously you're not Miss Powers, and I apologize. It was no disrespect or no intended disrespect to
You're
you.
quite all right, no apology needed. My name is Kevin Hutchins. I'm the elected treasurer for the county of Roanoke. I am also the past president for the Treasurers Association of Virginia. I am a current co-chair of our legislative committee. I am the chair of our office accreditation committee, and I am the first or the president-elect for the LACO, which is the Virginia Association of Elected Constitutional Officers. I list that whole litany of designations not to impress you, but hopefully to build a foundation that will be relevant as we go through some bullet points that will be in the presentation. One of the bad circumstances of going last is that Mrs. Reagan did a great job of covering several things. Knowing I was last, I tried to pare down my presentation to not get redundant or bore you. But if you have any additional questions, because I know there were a lot directed toward the treasurer that went toward Ms. Reagan, feel free to ask me as well. As I go through the presentation tonight, I may use the word inaccuracies. And when I say that, it's not to judge anyone, but in viewing your previous meetings, it came to my attention that there are some things that I judged as inaccurate that were presented to you, or possibly I just misunderstood them during the presentation. So if I use the word inaccuracy, just bear with me that you know I just heard something a little bit different in one of the presentations. I start off with a very basic slide. That we are, let's see, I guess I need a mouse on. Or do I get the page down here? Very basic premise that in the creed of the Treasurers Association, we are elected to serve. I take that as a very humble designation. I also have pride in that, if that seems a little oxymoronic, that as you, I am elected by the constituency of Roanoke County. I take that as a great charge for me to demonstrate fiscal responsibility and to do my job. I go about getting my job differently than some individuals within the government, much like you, I'm elected. The people in each locality have entrusted the treasurer to take care of their money. I see that as one of the greatest charges that I could be given. I am entrusted to something that does not belong to me. And as that, and as an association, we have taken up a mantle to change that. So I would quote one of our mission statements, which is to enhance professionalism and physical leadership among the treasurers, their staff, through education, networking, and performance standards. This we do in order to preserve the fundamentals of government, of the people, by the people, and for the people. I believe that as we build upon that, you will see on the next slide, as Ms. Reagan spoke to in her presentation, that we have direct representation to the electorate. I mean that you discussed, and Supervisor mentioned your department that gave a presentation earlier. about how they were a great ambassador for the county. We actually run a program that we kind of call the face of the county. The reason we run that program is because a lot of our citizens come into the first floor of our building and they never make it past the treasurer's office or the commissioner's office, which my commissioner is here. We get asked a lot of questions. I don't get asked where the recycle bin is, but I get asked just about everything. And we believe that we are there to serve no matter what. We have a disposition that if it could be asked for by the citizen, we're going to provide it. And that goes into a few other fronts that I will speak to in a minute. The voice of the people in day-to-day operations. A lot of times they have no idea how to get a hold of our budget director, how to get a hold of our director of finance, but they know where I am and they ask me. And sometimes that involves me getting into the other avenues that aren't necessarily within my silo, is the word that was used earlier, but I don't believe in the silo. And what I mean by that is the next bullet point, that we are an integral piece of the local government finances. Now here I go, I'm going to say some stuff about me again. This is not always the case, but I served on the GL RFP and implementation team. We put in a new GL system for the first time in 27 years. I was on that team. I've been since we went live July 5th, 2 years ago. 2 years ago. I am on the audit committee. I am on the revenue team. I am chair of our local finance board, which is the OPEB trust, and I have been for the last 3 years. If you participate in the other post-employment benefits trust, which I'm assuming you do. I am on the employee benefits RFP team and management for our retirement. And I also have served on the IT governance committee because we have a system we have to use. And if you did not know, we also use Tyler Munis, the same system that you use. And we have Tyler Cashiering that we've implemented there as well. And I've also been on the search committee for several of our directors. The reason that I bring that up in that bullet point is I think it is my job to serve you, to serve the government, and serve the people. And that is multifaceted. It may fall outside of my silo, as y'all talk about the word silo, but I don't believe in that word silo. We're elected to serve. I have other duties as prescribed by me to me. We do have certain MOUs. There was conversation about that. I have been on board since day one. This is my 15th year. So from day one, we have had certain MOUs, and they have been out there. Professional continuing education program. I spoke about it in our mission statement. I also mentioned that I was chair of the Office Accreditation Committee. I believe one of your previous speakers spoke to the fact that early in 2000s, the General Assembly passed something that kind of put some core competency requirements for treasurers to meet. That was, I could have misunderstood, that was actually brought to the General Assembly by us. We created, the association created the Master Governmental Treasurer Designation Program. It is administered through the Weldon Cooper Center at UVA. We created a whole set of professional courses, accounting, internal controls, finance, budgeting 101, customer service. There's a slew of courses voluntary to the elected officer to achieve that designation. But if you do achieve that designation, then you're eligible for a 9.3% pay enhancement through the General Assembly, providing that the General Assembly continues to fund for that pay enhancement. But the pay was just a sidebar. We wanted to have those professional standards in place. You can also take additional classes through VGFOA, which I'm sure you all know, Virginia Government Financial Officials. It's managed through Bradford, and they qualify for points within our program as well. So we take this very seriously. We also direct an office accreditation program, so not only do I get a designation or some of my staff get a designation, but then the office gets a official plaque for other things that we do For example, I have to have a signed ethics statement that I'm going to handle money, handle it properly, handle my citizens, that I'm going to have certain collection rates, certain classes, certain things that I've achieved, because we want our office to also provide professional treasury management services to our citizens, and then cross over to intergovernmental department reliability, that the board can rely on us, administration can rely on us, the other constitutional officers can rely on us. We did get General Assembly approval for that, as I spoke to. And then the other one is the extension of the local government at the state level. That may not seem obvious right off the bat. You guys have your own lobbyist. We're lobbying on behalf of the Treasurers Association, or treasurer duties, also on behalf of the Commissioner of Revenues and their duties. But we do that for what will enhance our abilities to perform our job, what will also bring in additional revenue, but also what can benefit the locality. Because, as you know, the only time we need to worry is when the General Assembly is in session. They may do something to us that's something we don't want done, so we have to do that kind of lobbying as well. We have built good relationships with a lot of them because we have to run with some of them when we're elected. So it behooves us to take on that mantle as well. So Treasury Services, here again is another issue that I wanted to speak to that was presented. The question was asked, has anybody removed the duties and had them restored? And the answer was, I don't believe so. Well, that was inaccurate. As you've already heard from Ms. Reagan, no contested referendum has been successful in changing the form of government since the mid-1970s. Period. This is accurate. Hanover County tried to do it in 1994, and it was defeated. Newport News in 1985. I only list that one because it was 2-1, and 2-1 is kind of a trend that it's usually 2-1. I did denote the city of Gaylacks. It was a special circumstance. I believe it was 2008. We did not participate. It was not contested by any of the associations. There were special circumstances involved, and because the city was small, we stayed out of it. That one did pass. I do not know the vote, but I don't think it was significant. Such referenda have historically been opposed by Taft, Corbett, and Vallejo. We would anticipate similar opposition to this. I bring up Vallejo because I'm the president-elect of Vallejo. We have not been asked to wade into this because you're doing your due diligence and you're deciding what you want to do. I do believe that it will come before Vallejo to make a ruling on how we will participate in the future. Outside of the defeated efforts, there have been other localities that we know about in the last few years who have actually investigated doing away with the offices or the duties. Now, that doesn't mean, as y'all have been looking at it from a county executive form of government or a county manager form of government, maybe they just wanted to abolish the duties. In all of those situations, and I have been privy or have partaken in a few of those in the last few years, after full investigation, those localities have decided not to do it for obvious reasons that I think Ms. Reagan has conveyed to you and that I am conveying to you. And I think the most important bullet point, which she also kind of alluded to, is in our experience, the citizens have not embraced the idea of giving up the right to elect the people who assess their property, collect their taxes, and manage their tax dollars in favor of appointed individuals. I too heard one of your previous speakers say that maybe she didn't feel like the electorate was wise enough to vote on a complex issue. I would say in my case, and in other cases, I feel like they were totally capable of making that decision, much like they are capable of making the decision to elect you seven. I had to think I was going to say that. Sorry. You seven up here. So I feel like you're in the same boat. And then the appointed director of finance and the county executive system actually concentrates an enormous amount of power in one person. That is evident on the next slide as I continue over, because in our world, and I make a comment at the bottom I'll go to first, in the universe of internal controls, there are precious few checks and balances. Internal controls are a living, breathing thing. We change our internal controls all the time based on who our staff is, what function they're handling. Somebody needs to offset the equation of who counted the cash, who's receiving the cash, who's posting the cash, who created the bill, who eliminated the DLF fee for some reason. We're always creating that. I see the lines, and I have seen the lines become blurred in the other direction with the director of finance, because that individual will assess all the property, will collect all the taxes, will manage all of the public funds, will make all disbursement of public funds, and will manage all the procurement. Before I ran for treasurer, I had been in financial services for 20 years. I was an investment consultant. I handled lots of individuals' investments. So obviously, I felt like I was qualified to do that. Not all individuals have, for example, that capability, but we'll train them to have that capability. So where there's a shortcoming, we will find a way to make sure that they are up to snuff to provide the treasury management services that you are demanding for them. So, restoration of duties. You've already heard a little bit of this. Roanoke County actually eliminated the duties of treasurer and commissioner, and it was under the guise, this was a quote, of streamlined government, efficiency in operation, and reduced spending. They actually, when the treasurer was elected, I believe it was 1971, new treasurer. In 1973, they came in and created a referendum to do away with the offices. It passed, and the office lost those duties in 1975. The referendum only passed by 291 votes, which was less than 1%. And the following year, in 1976, because real estate taxes were already going up and bureaucracy of having to create additional jobs was on the horizon, they started a referendum to reverse it, and it passed overwhelmingly in a landslide vote. Now, I hope that I know what you guys are saying, that you're looking at me saying, this guy's too young, he doesn't know what he was talking about in 1973 and 75. Thank you for that. I feel vindicated there. I would only be about 8 to 10 years old, but I actually have letters from the previous treasurer, who I did not know at the time, who became a dear friend after I ran for office, and I have letters that he wrote on the subject that went to several different newspapers. So I have timestamps, if you will, on that subject matter. Now that's just one that abolished and came back. Now for other localities which stripped duties at some point in time, Mrs. Powers couldn't be here tonight, but in Roanoke City, prior to her engagement, specifically collection duties did not fall to the city treasurer, and they have not been. She was responsible for billing the first year taxes, and then taxes were collected by a collections department after 1 year. There were problems with that. I don't know what led to the ultimate demise of it, but in 2013, they gave the collection duties back to the treasurer's office for the first time after 30 years, and it's gone so well that in 2017, they also gave her the collection of the trust taxes, which had not been in that department either. I also mentioned the city of Franklin. The city of Franklin, when they got a new treasurer, they took away the duties, and on 5 years to the date after they removed the duties, March 1st, 2005 to March 1st, 2010, they gave the duties back to the treasurer. They appointed the treasurer, she just didn't have all the duties when they took them away. They gave them back to her in 2010, and the way the Constitution was advised, and they're very happy with that process now. They found that the powers that were given to the treasurer within State Code of Virginia are immense on how to go about collections. It's not a fun job sometimes. Sometimes it leads to security issues. We've had our fair share of irate individuals that have come into the office, and we've had to change some of our security patterns within the building. We've had to hire a security guard. We have cameras. We have talked about other avenues. We redid the office, and we have glass separating our staff in large part from the public, but we have very open windows that they can work through. Because it's not always a happy circumstance, but I would venture to give you the fact that I think we're prepared to deal with that, and we're representative of the people, so we want to help them. And yeah, it may get out of hand, but I think that we're very prepared to do that since we're elected. I also mentioned the city of Gloucester, only because I heard it in your meeting. At no point that I'm aware of did the city of Gloucester try to take the duties away from the Treasurer Commissioner, nor did they try to change their form of government, and I can at least validate that to the end of the 1990s. There was an event in 2008. I believe that I might have heard this incorrectly. This event was where a majority of the board was elected at one time. They proceeded to fire the county administrator and the county attorney.
They did.
Hired a campaign manager of one of the new board members, and it created quite this thing that lasted a few weeks. Could have misheard that in the presentation, so I just wanted to clarify that. You've already got this slide, and I'll paraphrase and get to it later. I am in no means an expert of the state compensation board. These are estimates they provided. If Montgomery County were to go to another form of director of finance, it has the same reduction number that Ms. Reagan had in her slide. And she amply pointed out that there is no funding for several deputies. There are several deputies that would lose funding, and then the principal offices would lose it. The net decrease would be $74,000. I will actually speak to the other part of this statement in just a minute as I go to another slide. So as I wrap this up, I had to phrase this up as a history of unrealized goals. And the reason being is because that we have seen some of the goals that you would like to achieve not come to fruition out of this process. Cost savings. So I'm back to the previous slide kind of. There is a reduction in the reimbursed contribution. We have found it usually requires additional staff, because once you get rid of the staff, then you start looking at internal controls. How do we do certain things? Then all of a sudden you're having to increase staff, or you're having to pay for some of the staff that you've already had there. Like I said, internal controls to us is a very large issue to make sure that everybody is doing correctly what they're supposed to do, and they're not touching both sides of an equation that could lead to some type of audit problem, or, as you know, sometimes when you're dealing with money, for some people, where there's a will, there's a way. So you want to protect yourself from that. Also, that we have found in a few circumstances, there have been localities that were unwilling to provide additional staff to treasurer's offices. Then after they took control of it, they went out and provided additional staff once it is underneath them. I cannot speak to why they did that. I can make assumptions. I don't think there's any reason for me to elaborate. Operational efficiencies. This will be a driver for increased staff. We have actually seen this come to play. This was one of the things that was one of the items that was given to me that occurred in Roanoke County all those years ago. I understand that it's happened in a few other situations, and I know at least one other locality, which I am being told that's more current, that is in the process of adding additional staff that is more than what they were looking for cost reductions when they took the duties away. So just want to prepare you that I believe that there's a definite historical trend that would indicate that that could increase. We have already spoken about the law citizen engagement. We're directly accessible to the citizens. She mentioned this before, Ms. Reagan. I believe this is the duty of the electorate If they're not pleased with what I'm doing, they can unelect me. I believe it's my job to show up and do my job. And I believe that most constitutional officers believe that as well. My goal is that while y'all are discussing this on a local level, if it ever were to come to fruition on a state level, then my job is to make myself indispensable so that if it ever happened, the county government would have to look no further than trying to hire me, because I can do the job. And I believe that I know lots of other constitutional officers that feel the same way and have that belief system. We want to be indispensable. I put this statement near the end because I'm back to some of the things you talked about before. Control over these functions can be elusive. What I mean by that is that when you're seeking control, my job and what other constitutional officers view their job is that you may not ultimately control me, or the county administrator may not ultimately control me because I do have anonymity. But not only do I serve the individual citizens, I serve my supervisors, I serve my county manager. We work together as a team. If there is something that I think behooves us to do, then I'm going to look at doing it, whether I came up with the idea or not, because it all makes good business sense. I think when you try to control that situation, even if you put it under a director of finance, you may find that some of that goals of control may not happen. We've seen it happen in other localities where one of the premises was that they could gain control over that, but they really didn't succeed in gaining full control because there's other elements, or what I refer to as the law of unintended consequences, for when you make changes, you envision that we have sat in a room and we've talked about every nuance of what could happen when we do that. But then it doesn't happen because, we didn't think about how that was going to happen, or we didn't think about how that system was going to process that piece of information. And we find that it can lead to a lack of control. Hopefully our goal is to make sure that we've covered all of those aspects to keep it from getting to that point. So those conclude my prepared remarks, but if you have any questions, which I'm sure you do listening to earlier, I'm here.
I'll start off with Supervisor Bone. Sarah?
So I think you said that you were an investment advisor in a previous life?
Yes, ma'am.
And so have you found opportunities to increase revenue on cash held? And what kind of rates have you experienced?
Well, it's hard to get investment returns right now. And with governmental money, it's even harder because of the collateral requirements that exist with banks. Since the economic downturn, you can look at rates that we were achieving that were easily 5% or over. At one point, rates went down to where you could possibly get a 1-year treasury security at maybe an 1/8 or quarter basis point. And that held level for a year or two. Then you had the opposite side of the equation where your earnings credit ratio at the bank, which is, we'll say it's the way that we pay the bank through soft money instead of paying them for cash. We use that on compensating balances to offset that. Your ECR basically dropped to a negative, but the banks wouldn't let it be a negative, so they kind of kept it up at like 0.04. So as we are regaining momentum, we didn't see investment returns for quite a while, and there were actually investments that were out there that I thought were not prudent. So I wouldn't actually put our money into. Then you had other things like CDARS, if you've heard of those, where you can disperse your money to different banks as a CD and get FDIC insurance up to $250,000. But the problem with that was the banks bid on it and your money ends up going to another bank somewhere else in the country. And if you actually start looking at the banks, you'll start making a rational decision, oh, that's not a bank I want my money in. And if it were to go in, we could get our money back, but it may take 3 to 6, 9 months to get our money back. So there are other problems there. So generically speaking, we're lucky if we're back in the 2% range. My job with investments, I've had these conversations with management. I've had them with entities that I'm fiscal agent for. As you know, years ago, if you were on the supervisory board then, that some departments or other agencies would plug their holes with other income earned. That went away for several years, and we had to advise and adjust those outlooks to say you're not going to get that additional money right now. So returns are now starting to go up. As you know, the stock market has unprecedentedly risen the last 12 months, and we may be in the middle of the correction, but the stock market and equities going up does not mean that fixed income is going up, but we are seeing rates start to go back over 2%. We operate kind of a complex little cash flow model, so I have certain things out on a further horizon than 1 year, 2 year, trying to earn more money, but not nearly as much as we'd like to see.
Can you tell me a little bit about the term? Like, is the longest term that you're willing to put your money in is 2 years?
Well, in general terms, you don't want to go too far when you're looking at government money. However, because I manage a cash flow model, we do have, and we can go out with government agency or government bonds, we can go out longer. But if you actually tried to take all of our money and then extrapolate it on a time horizon, it's really still short. You'd be lucky if you got past 3 years because I have other cash flows the county needs that I can't go out that far for.
And then what is your most aggressive investment that you have, that you use or have used?
I have actually taken a more conservative approach over the last few years, and it actually started before the economic downturn. I actually removed ourselves from some of our investments. We had a couple funds that maybe had some corporate securities which were allowed, but I did not like, and kind of removed ourselves. So we have basically been fully in government, U.S. government agencies, or some bank deposits, or LGIP for the past 5.5, 6 years. Memory eludes me on that. It may be a little bit longer now.
Your memorandums of understanding. You talked about being the face of your county. What other above and beyond types of memorandums of understanding do you actually do?
Well, in my particular case, we did not go out and sign a bunch of other memorandum of understandings. And the reason being is because we already made agreements with other departments and other agencies that we were going to do what they needed us to do. So that is one of the reasons that I listed out the different committees that I am on. I view my job as being a director, but instead of being hired, I'm elected, so I'm a constitutional officer. Because I deal with finance, I'm having to deal directly with the director of finance, the director of budget, these other departments, and we actually have very good working relationships. I'm also fiscal agent for the Resource Authority and the Regional Jail, but that's also kind of cooperative because it's between me and the director of finance as well.
One question, I think this might be my last question, but bear with me here. On your slide that had Treasury Services and you talked about the City of Galax, I wasn't quite sure. You talked about the association not getting involved or going pro or con because of special circumstances. But did that pass or it didn't pass?
It did pass, and I believe probably the only reason it passed is because we didn't get involved. We were asked to stay out of it, but there was extenuating circumstances. Because of the size of the city, we did not have a problem with that.
And how long ago was that? I'm sorry.
I think it was 2008. I would be more than willing to go back and look that up and send it to you. And matter of fact, Jeff, you know, it's about right.
All right. Bear with me. I see another question. All right. Last question. So you were an investment advisor. Do you think you have any special abilities that make you really great at what you do?
Do I have any special abilities? I don't know if I had
Because you
any-
were an investment advisor.
Well, obviously, I am the chief investment officer of the county. Now, that's not an official title, but that's what I do. So obviously, I think that I have a leg up over anybody else in that regard. There are some localities that may have an investment board that is between 2 or 3 different people, but I have seen in some of those cases that they may not know as much collectively as I know. So I believe that gives me a leg up. Collections, I had no real experience with collections whatsoever. I took my first course for collections after I was elected, before I took office. So I wanted to know what was going on and what our powers were beforehand, because that is a large part of it. Plus I had a concentration in real estate with my bachelor's in business finance. So I understood the real estate premise as well. So there are a few things that I think I was prepared for, but whether or not those are special abilities, I don't have a capital S under my shirt. So
Thank you for your service.
thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd.
Just one question. How's your relationship with the commissioner?
I think that Nancy and I have a good relationship. We do not always see eye to eye, do we, Nancy? But we agree that we work for the constituency, and my office door is open and her office door is open, and we go across the hall whenever we need to.
Sounds good. That's all I have.
Supervisor King.
No questions. Thank you for your time, though.
Supervisor Fidzikowski.
So Roanoke County has both Director of Finance and a Treasurer?
Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead,
What,
sir.
I was going to say, what does the Director of Finance do?
She does a lot of duties. Please remember that while Roanoke County abolished the duties and took them back in the 70s, in 1986, you may know the answer to that, Council. I have to go back and look. We became a charter county.
Right.
So we were a little bit different. The treasurer and the commissioner retain their duties, but the Director of Finance is over some disbursement, physical agent responsibilities to other circumstances, in charge of audit, and generally more in charge of the general ledger than I am. I feed into the general ledger. I handle the daily side. She's handling the reporting functions and the audit.
So it sounds like there definitely was no cost savings involved in that change.
After the change back, I don't think that was the way we were primarily set up beforehand. When the duties were abolished, there was a mixture of jobs being rotated and switched around, and when it became apparent that changes were being made, that's when the electorate started a petition to put the referendum back on the ballot to put the duties back. So once again, that is slightly before my time, so I cannot speak fully to the cost there, but from what I was given from the prior treasurer, there initially was no cost savings. There was an increase in staff, and then when we reverted back, I'm not sure what the ultimate numbers ended up being.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Demots.
In the instances where, hold on, I should have been ready for this, and I was not. The Treasurers Association of Virginia, the Commissioner of Revenues Association of Virginia, and VALECO,
Vallejo.
Virginia Local Elected Constitutional Officers. When they have opposed referendum on the ballot, what does that look like? What does the opposition look like? Is it coming to meetings like this? Is it marketing campaigns? Is it? I know that we up here are not allowed to really be opinionated if it was to go to a referendum, but I would assume something would come out of those associations.
I believe that you were correct in all of your assessments. The associations have gotten involved. They have written letters to the editors. They have done marketing materials. They have gone out to events in the public where warranted. Yes.
And to your knowledge, when those associations have opposed the change, it generally is defeated 2-1.
I would say more than my knowledge. We have a couple of different attorneys that represent us. One is our retained lobbyist, Alan Albert at LeClaire Ryan. He has more precise figures on all those, but every one of them has pretty much been soundly defeated.
And this is just pure speculation, but there's a lot of people here from out of town that wouldn't normally be here. It looks like a pretty strong representation of membership from those associations that are already here tonight at after, well, I guess it's about 10 o'clock. Probably fairly opposed to these ideas already at this early stage. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair assessment. I think this is, to be honest with you, I think this is a minor turnout.
Thank you.
Supervisor Biggs.
Okay, like you talked about a lot of communication going back and forth with Commissioner and with the finance people and, with your elected officials. Okay, so one of the things, that we sometimes struggle with here, are bank fees, investments, security issues in the treasurer's office, and, the collection of delinquent taxes and possible land sales. So in your communication like that you have established, are these items discussed at all, or are those more, they're just in your realm and you do them?
I believe now the majority of the time that these questions come up are probably, for example, when we have a revenue team meeting. The revenue team meeting is we are constantly looking and projecting what our revenues are going to possibly be for next year, what assessments may rise in real estate and or personal property. Some of those things are hard to gauge. Some of them we have better information to, because we do have a real estate assessment department and we reassess every year. So we're able to get a foothold on some of those. However, the comments as we go around the room get back to the things that I am in charge of, and I guess I would have to paraphrase by saying, because I've been there for 15 years, we've had these open conversations. Most people in the room know what I'm doing. County administration usually knows what my initial collection rate is, or they're asking how are we looking now when certain things come up. The budget director even knew before I made a comment to the board last year that the treasurer came in with an additional 1.some million in personal property collections we weren't expecting, which helped close the hole. So he knew before I actually gave him the numbers, and was already telling the board about it and was asking me about it. So they know.
Now, who's on this revenue team and how often do they meet?
It comes in cycles, but typically we could meet at least 3 or 4 times just in the first quarter of the year before we have our budget presentation. Revenue team meeting is the budget director, assistant county administrator, commissioner of the revenue, myself as treasurer, director of finance, director of real estate evaluation. Am I going too fast? I thought you were taking notes, so I'm sorry.
Well, I am taking notes because, see, this is something I think is just critically important that we haven't done. And that's not to say, to blame anyone, but putting all those folks together seems like to me would best serve the needs of your citizens. So go ahead. So who else is, you guys have a lot more than we do. But
we have our director of finance for the schools is on the revenue committee.
Wow.
I'm sure I'm missing 1 or 2 people, but that sounds like about 8 or 9 people. I think we have probably 12 or we have the director of economic development is on our committee, because we discuss possible economic events that are coming up, or a new building that's being built, or something that we're not sure of that may be going on the tax rolls. If we have an incentive package that we gave to a business to come to the county, we want to know when are the taxes going to hit. Can we count on that as revenue in FY this year, FY next year? She's another member. I'm sure I'm missing 1 or 2, but.
So in your association, you all, I guess, have models of different ways that this can work, or I guess you discuss it at your meetings and that kind of thing, like when you have association meetings. I'm just interested in the whole concept of how you bring people together to do the work of the people that elect you. That's what I'm interested in.
Well, we may or may not necessarily have a visual model of this is how it's going to work. In the fact that we have classes, we also have a spring district meeting and a fall district meeting, and we look for educational subjects to discuss at those meetings. We have 4 meetings across the state within a short period of time that covers the same topics. We could cover new implementations from the DMV on certain things we do within the programs we utilize, or we may discuss relationships with our boards. We have a lot of other topics that we bring forth because we want to make sure that we can allow our members to be as professional as possible. And it covers a wide gamut, since there's 4 meetings geographically across the state that occur in the spring, and then another 4 in the fall. And we rotate what those topics are. Commissioners of Revenue do a very similar program with district meetings. So topics can come forward by one treasurer who wants to bring up a topic, or it can come about from the Education Oversight Committee who decides this is a topic we need to discuss.
Okay. Thank you for your professional presentation and for answering my questions.
Thank you, ma'am.
I just have a few questions. Holding you up to be the gold standard, and I don't know if you recall, you and I have talked on the telephone before a few times.
Sir. A couple years ago.
Yes, and I greatly appreciate the time that you gave me then, and I appreciate the time that you're giving our board now. Just a few questions. It sounds like from your responses to Supervisor Bone that you do put your banking services out to bid. That's something that you're looking to do.
My banking services are actually out to bid right now. I'm in the middle of a response period, so I can't really speak to it, but I'm waiting on responses to be submitted by March the 2nd.
And there's also a consortium, the Virginia Investment Pool.
Yes.
And that, right now, the return rate on, and that's funds that would be accessible within 24 hours, is 1.59%. And so that starts at $1 all the way up, to accessible funds for 24 hours. And then for longer term investment, it's 2.15. Is that correct?
You are correct. There are 2 different programs.
Yes.
And there are 2 different, there is a program, there are 2 different programs for the Virginia Investment Pool, and then there's 2 programs now for LGIP as well. One has a net asset value of $1, dollar in, dollar out. That means I can get my money right away.
That's that lower rate, the 1.59.
That is correct. And I
think that's 24-hour notice you required.
You don't need 24-hour notice on that. I can, as long as I submit an order before 10 o'clock, I can have my money wired to me within a couple hours.
Okay.
You have to have a cutoff for the sale. And I would submit to you on top of that I can get better returns with 2-year securities right now. I just don't get the cash flow on it. I can also go out to the longer term pool, which you mentioned, but because they're longer term investments, you cannot get a net asset value of $1 to get out today. You have certain periods you have to notify to then get your money out at that period of time. So
it's like a 6-month CD, for an example, or a year-long CD. You're not easily accessible with that higher rate.
You have to plan for it with your cash flow model to get your money out when you need it.
Now, kind of holding you up to be the gold standard. And here in Montgomery County, we've struggled a little bit. We don't get any interest on the first $8 million, 0. And so if you take that 1.59 million and you put a 1.59 interest rate in just over a year's time, and I've got 2 school board members looking at that, we're paying for a school teacher just by putting it in that account that's accessible as a consortium that all the governments are allowed to access, correct?
You can access it. I cannot speak directly to your comments because I don't know your investment amount of money. I don't know the available monies or funds to invest. I don't know what your cash flow need is, but you are correct in your assessment of that.
And our roughly, and this is a rough estimate, and Craig will probably hit me for start doing rough estimates, but 30-40 million is our average balance. And so we're averaging more than $8 million. And then part of it is also we've set aside money for schools, and we're not touching that money over a period of time. And so we could put it in that higher rate of investment, right?
It sounds like there's opportunity there, but once again, I can't really speak to it because I haven't seen your fund balances and where they're sitting.
And we can hope for a gold standard like yourself and hope that we get somebody who's putting those investments out or trying to get new banking and those type of things, but we're not guaranteed that.
Correct, you're not guaranteed. I hesitate to have you lift me up as a gold standard because that means I will fail dramatically, but it sounds like from what I'm hearing that there's opportunity there to at least make some more money.
All right. And
there's a lot of things to be considered in what you gave me in that short synopsis.
All right, just a couple other things. Your collections rates. When was the last time you did a real estate properties sales?
Last year.
So not 7 years, 6, 7 years?
Oh no. We did have a period of time where we didn't have a sale for a few years, but we've had one sale a year for the last 3 or 4 years. But I am completely in control of that process. I am able to, actually, this is, if you don't mind me elaborating.
Don't mind you elaborating. I know that I was late. I'm going to take a break after this, but please elaborate.
This is one of those situations where I think as treasurer versus a director of finance, I'm directly responsible to make this hard decision. I have to sell somebody's property. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure somebody is not in it. We go bend over backwards to try to make sure there's nobody in the property. We don't want to dislocate anyone, but we have to make that hard decision to get it back on the tax rolls if they cannot adhere to a payment plan or do other things. So we may start out looking at 30, 50, 70 properties. Typically speaking, when we get to an auction, we have 15 to 25 properties because it's the only ones left that we couldn't get movement on. And we have a few circumstances where, unfortunately, it may come down to that hard decision, but I believe that's what I'm there for. I get to hire the attorney. I have the capability to do that. I make that own decision. Actually, one of our legal counsel that's here tonight actually is an attorney who also does sales as well.
Do you put that out to bid, and or did you just select it? I know you've got the right to, but did you put it out to bid for?
I do not, because it's legal services, and I do not have to put that out for bid.
Okay. In regards to now, as I understand it, in Montgomery County ballpark, as of June of last year, we've got $3.5 million worth of delinquent taxes that have not been paid. So that's a big chunk of money.
Real estate or both? Personal property and real estate?
I want to make sure I don't want to misspeak, so I don't know. That may be just real estate.
Okay.
And so we haven't had a tax sale. Have you seen your delinquency rate go down when you've had tax sales? Well, you're having them annually, though.
Dear, I would almost make the argument to you that this is a perpetual situation, because we can try as much as we want to clean up the tax rolls today, and the new taxes are going to be delinquent next month, and we're going to start the process all over. So we may have a rolling average of $1.5 million to $2 million of delinquent real estate, and after a sale we may get that down to 1.2 million, and all of a sudden it's back up again. There's not a rhyme or reason to it. Someone can make the argument by having a tax sale. You're putting the public on notice. They're seeing, oh, the treasurer is going to sell my property. We all know not everyone looks at the newspaper, so how effective that is, I can't really say, but we do our job and we keep it going.
I think those are the basic questions I have for you. Now, to be fair to you, if a treasurer's not doing that, it takes 4 years before you can make a change. It takes years to be able to make that change.
Yes, from an election standpoint, I would hope that, that's what, I know that, I'll back up. I know that there was an election in another locality just a few months ago. That was one of the elements that was up, that the treasurer had not had a tax sale in years and years. There's a new treasurer. They had a tax sale right before the new treasurer took over. I think there's room. I would argue that the board and county administrator would probably say, hey, you're going to have a tax sale. We think you should go out and do what you need to do. Don't necessarily get in the middle of it, but tell them to get it done.
You know, and that would be a reasonable, and you may not know this and may have not realized, but we did ask our treasurer to put our banking out to bid. We offered our staff to help him put it out to bid. And he, as a constitutional officer, absolutely had the right to say, no, I'm not going to put our banking out to bid. And I've just ran through that pool numbers, and we're not getting any interest on the first $8 million. And that's one of the things a constitutional officer has, that right to just say no.
Unfortunately cannot speak to that. I am unaware of the circumstance here in Montgomery County, or the reluctance or not reluctance to do that, but I would surely do that in my locality.
I greatly appreciate that. Now, that may have spurred some other questions. If there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and it is about, thank you very much for attending. I know the hour is late. We're going to go out of work session, then maybe take a 10-minute break. Thank you again on behalf of the board for coming up here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to come out of work session?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Kuzikowski?
Aye.
Ms. Demoss?
If I say no, will we stay in work session forever?
would. Well, I think you're going to get outvoted.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
It's 10 after 10. I would say let's take a 10-minute break because we want to move on, and we'll be back. All right, 15?
It's 15.
10 is fine. Okay. We'll be
Show.
All right, I cheated. It's 10:25 before we got started back. I apologize. Next on our agenda is public address. This is the Board of Supervisors' time to listen to our citizens, not necessarily respond to individual citizens. Our staff will be taking your name and address. Each citizen will have 5 minutes. We'll ask you to state your name and address. And the first person on our list is Julia Lewis. If you would come forward, you don't have to have signed up to be able to speak. So we'll go through the folks who have signed up, and then we'll go through folks who have not. And Miss Lewis, if you could adjust the mic.
Good evening. My name is Julia Lewis. My address is 1173 Oakland Square, Blacksburg. Did you hear me?
Yeah.
I heard you, but we may have not picked it up on the video. So if you would repeat your name and address again, that would be great.
Okay, Julia Lewis, 1173 Oakland Square, Blacksburg.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. I am here to speak in favor of keeping the two constitutional offices, the Commissioner of Revenue and the Treasurer's Office, to keeping them. To make this change would put all the power in the hands of the Board of Supervisors. Reduces the taxpayers' ability to go directly to the assessors to voice his or her concerns. Reduces accountability to the citizens. Allows the board to control not only how tax money is spent, but also to determine how much each taxpayer owes. The board incorrectly suggests the change will save money. The board also suggests that the changes would give employees job security. I would like to ask Richard Shelton and Helen Royal how many of their employees they have fired because of poor performances. I can't help but think eliminating these two constitutional offices is politically motivated by Chairman Chris Tuck. Therefore, I propose keeping these two officers intact.
Thank you, ma'am. The next speaker is Estelle Putney. Ms. Putney, please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Estelle Putney. I live at 435 Big Sky Trail in Blacksburg. I can't speak to the details and specifics of this question, but I'm an authority on my experience of what's been going on. I voted for the first our current Commissioner of Revenue. She won. I was very happy. The next thing I knew, you were taking her salary away from her. I never heard of such a thing. There's some kind of money that somebody before her got was taken away from her. And the next thing I knew, legal action was being taken against her. She is somebody that I voted for. I thought things were resolved, that she has kept her job, she's accepted her salary, and she's, I haven't heard any complaints about her work. And now, all of a sudden, I find out you're trying to take her job away from her. And the treasurer. And not only are you trying to take the job away from her and the treasurer, you're trying to take her job away from me. My, won't that get you a nice handful of power? You get to appoint a financial officer, and that person is beholden to you. As constitutional officers, neither the Commissioner of Revenue nor the Treasurer is beholden to you. They're independent. If you can't stand that you have two independent constitutional officers, I think you ought to recuse yourself from this discussion. I did not come away from the first attacks against this woman with a high opinion of the Board of Supervisors. What's going on now has lowered it. And if it comes to that, I'm good at circulating petitions. And I'd be unhappy to do it, but I would do it because I think it needs to be done. I therefore suggest that you keep the two independent constitutional officers and that I be allowed to vote for them. And when the Commissioner of Revenue comes up again, I will vote for her again. That's it.
The next speaker is, and his handwriting, is it Matt Prater?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Prater, please come forward and state your name. You have 5 minutes.
Matt Prater, 601 Ascot Lane, Blacksburg. First of all, Chairman, members, thank you for letting me speak. I know the thing you all do not want to do after you've been working here for 5 hours, you've come and got dressed up, is to have people who are just coming off the street in blue jeans to come and tell you all the things you're doing wrong. And that seems to be the only thing that people, when we come, want to do. And I don't want to do that. That said, I have been asked, friends, I volunteer with MCDC. Some of them have said, please come share our concerns about the process. And I wanted to say that there are a number of people who are concerned. I believe mostly for the reasons that the representative from the treasurers and the Commissioner of Revenues Associations have stated. Chief among them, I don't know what the political motivations or the personal relationships of this situation are because I'm coming from outside of it. But I think the base idea that these two offices are separated, the Office of Treasurer and the Office of Commissioner of Revenue, is to avoid any appearance of impropriety from either side, because who is in power switches over time. And the idea that you have someone who is taking money also be in charge of appropriating and spending money can create issues. And I think that is a cause for concern, not because the people in power in those offices or any of you all have bad intent. I think from any number of county boards that I've gone to, this seems to be one of the most highly functioning and best deliberating bodies I've seen. But the true concern I've had as I've listened to this conversation is that I've noticed a pattern that there seems to be a focus here on what we stand to lose and where we need to find attrition, where we need to combine offices or focus on how we're going to lose money rather than on growth. I think, Chairman, you had an excellent idea when the first speaker spoke about the idea of having an e-tournament in town, about looking for opportunities for investment in increased revenue. And I come from a county, originally Smith County, like most people, and many people in Blacksburg. I'm not originally from there. But I came because the community and the government has a growth mindset and is looking for ways to expand its economy and expand its community. But in my county, we used to have a rather rarely robust manufacturing base. We had a college in the middle of the 20th century. But over time, those things started to dilapidate. And our government, both town and at this county level, started focusing on attrition, started focusing on where it could cut money, started focusing on how it could avoid having to deal with pay increases. And now we have one of the worst pay scales for teachers in Southwest Virginia. We are hemorrhaging jobs, we are hemorrhaging factories, and we are losing the ability to attract work and attract teachers because we were focusing on how are we going to avoid loss rather than where can we find opportunities for gain and growth. I do not know what the answer politically to the situation is. I don't assume to know any more than you all do. You seem to have been quite invested in this. But I would urge the board to look at opportunities further west than here and to see where a mindset in the government that was focused only on stopping loss and cutting costs actually ended up creating more losses for the local government long term than it did solve problems. I thank you for your time, and I thank you sincerely, whether I agree with you or not on the position you're taking, on your focus on trying to save us money and our focus on trying to make government streamlined. I believe, and this will be the last thing I say, that the middle ground of going for memorandums of understanding seems to be a step that we could take that most of you seem to agree on, that maybe not as severe as going to the step you suggested today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Those are all the individuals that signed up. However, you don't have to have signed up. If anyone would like to address the board, please come forward and you will have 5 minutes. All right, I'm not, okay, there we go. I was going to say, I'm not seeing anybody come forward.
I'm back. I haven't been here addressing the board for a while, but I thank you for allowing me to do so. My name is Diana Richardson, and I live at 1431 Breckenridge Drive, Blacksburg, Virginia. Because of my dealings over the past 4 years as an anti-pipeline activist, I have become a more cynical citizen, really. Mainly because I and our other fighters have had to deal with federal and state governments which do not have enough checks and balances. We've dealt with FERC, as you all well know because you've dealt with them too, who is not answerable to anyone. Also, we've had to deal with state politicians, some of who have accepted even hundreds of thousands of dollars from monopoly energy groups. In other words, the fix has been in, and it's been stacked against citizens in terms of our rights. In a similar vein, and because I do believe in checks and balances, I am totally against the Board of Supervisors trying to aggregate power instead of letting the citizens make decisions at the polls, as is our privilege to vote for commissioners of revenue and treasurers. I'm insulted as a voter by the insinuation on another evening by a previous speaker that I and my fellow Montgomery County voters aren't smart enough to understand complex issues, and we don't know enough or know how to vote for the appropriate Commissioner of Revenue or Treasurer who is working for us. I think that's our decision to make. I have so many other reasons that the dissolution of elected officials' offices is not a good idea, that I don't have time to discuss all of those in 5 minutes. I may come back and discuss them at some other time. But sadly, and I do mean this earnestly, I do want to counter your insinuation, Chairman Tuck, tonight, that elected officials, specifically Commissioners of Revenue and Treasurers, would not take their job seriously enough to show up for work. If I were one of those Commissioners of Revenue or Treasurers sitting out there tonight, I would really take umbrage at your question that certainly seemed to disparage them. I respect and trust you and all of you enough to do your job that we elected you to do. I would never expect that you would take vacation or not show up for work. I don't think that was an appropriate question to ask another professional. And it really saddened me to see you do that tonight. Thank you.
Is there any other speakers? Thank you, ma'am.
You don't have to.
You want to come on?
Yep. Okay. I'm Linda Majors, 2620 Mount Tabor Road, Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm on the coordinating team of Preserve Montgomery County, and with me is
Tom Adams at Blacksburg, Virginia, 1724 Sage Lane. I'm the chair of Preserve Montgomery County, Virginia.
So we're representing citizens and Preserve Montgomery County. I was told that before I got here at 8 o'clock that you discussed the desire of the citizens to have an interactive question and answer period regarding the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And I was also told that, oh wow, it's going to be on the internet. When we get the answers to questions, we'll stick them up there. Elliston has at least 2 landowners holding out that do not have the internet. This is not acceptable because it doesn't satisfy all the citizens. We have to have an interactive discussion with officials that are going to give us the answers, and we have to have follow-up questions. This is serious. This is our lives. This is landowners. This is something you have to take seriously and deal with your citizens and the questions and the horror that's going to come for us. I want to update you on what's going on right now. You're behind already. Elizabeth Dillon, Judge Elizabeth Dillon, a federal judge, on Wednesday got a draft order from MVP saying that they wanted to rush things really fast. And they wanted to be able to survey and mark the limits of disturbance within 3 days. By Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, she put it in her own words and made it official. 4 days from Friday is tomorrow. Surveyors could be out there. Surveyors could be appraisers also. Surveyors could be, God knows who it is. They're already, the only restriction she's put on that is daylight hours. There's no notification. There's no nothing. They're coming. Giles County got a notice to proceed today from FERC. Those two things together equal what? Construction. Everything happening. Roads, EMS, sheriff, guns. You guys got to get on top of it. You have to be responsive to your citizens. I am here, and Tom, representing the citizens. The others are supportive in Giles County at their meeting. But we are here representing it, telling you, you have to address this. Alliston, you have got, all of you have to be responsive to those citizens in Alliston that do not have the internet. You don't understand how restrictive that is for people to get information. The only way they're getting anything is through me.
And it goes beyond Elliston, many parts of the county.
But Alliston are two people that he knows and I know that are holding out, doing everything they can, and it's very difficult when you don't have communication. Tomorrow, they could be there, but the judge's order doesn't have every single parcel on it. It doesn't have the access road on it. They will be there with that judge's order that I gave them, and they will be calling the sheriff and telling him, look, this parcel isn't on here. There will be a problem. They will be standing up for this whenever it happens. You have to be responsive and understand what's going on. You guys are behind. This is not about just a endangered species now. This is about getting rushed through the process. You want to say anything, Tom?
The only thing I would add is this goes hand in hand with what Diana just talked about in terms of responsiveness of our elected officials. And it leads directly to a lot of the frustration we're seeing nationally and maybe even internationally about how the people, the citizens of localities of the country are so frustrated by government. You can't let this happen locally. You can't.
Is there any other citizens who would like to address me? Madam Commissioner, would you please come forward? I've learned some things. I didn't know we had filed suit against you.
I hope not, because that would scare me to death, and I'd have to get Marty to tell me what to do. I just came up here to thank you all for listening to what was presented tonight. I think they've made their case. I know that two of us have agreed to disagree, but I'm very proud of the association and the people that I work with. They've taught me a lot through these last 6.5 years. I'm not a public speaker, I'm not a politician, but I really, really appreciate the reception that they received. It makes me proud that I live in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other speakers that would like to address the board before I close public hearing? I'm not seeing anyone else come forward. Does the board have, I want to make sure to clarify one thing, and if no one has any objection, I did want to make it clear that we plan on having a work session in 2 weeks to give citizens the opportunity to address the board, but as we get answers up, we will provide those on the internet, and that's what Mr. Meadows addressed. And perhaps, I don't know if some of the folks weren't here, but that was addressed by Mr. Meadows specifically, that we're going to have a work session to go through a lot of the questions. We've gotten some good questions and good emails that will be addressed by the board in 2 weeks during the work session. In addition, there will be public address. If you have additional questions, please submit those in emails in regards to the pipeline. But I hope folks didn't mind me clarifying that, but I did want to make sure. Yes, Supervisor
I think
Bowman?
Ms. Majors brought up a good point that if we can have an opportunity for follow-up questions after they ask questions and we answer, that would help also to further clarify and understand what exactly they're looking for, if there's a way to do that.
And we can talk with staff. I know one of the things that we want to do is get legal advice of what we can and what we can't do.
Well, and if I can add to that, one of the things that everybody will have to understand is we don't have control of this project. A lot of the answers that we'll be giving on the 26th are, if this happens, you need to call this agency. If this happens, you need to call this agency. Calling the county is not going to solve the issue because we don't have control of the issue. You know, VDOT, DEQ, there are other agencies that will be involved, and that's what we're going to talk about. That's what Roanoke County talked about. But, I am concerned about, and I know Ms. Majors has been very passionate, and I appreciate that very much. But, this emphasis of doing something. The county can facilitate information and provide contacts, but we don't have the authority to do anything.
Also, she brings up the Elliston and, plenty of parts in the county that don't have connection.
But a couple of things. One, people will be able to come to that work session. Two, it'll be accessible on the internet. Three, at Meadowbrook at the library, there is internet access for individuals to be able to come and to look those answers up if they would like. So those are all things I believe that to give folks that opportunity. But I did want to address that because it seemed like that we weren't going to have a meeting, we weren't going to discuss that. That was brought up specifically, and again, I just want to make sure folks heard that we are having a meeting and a work session to go through that, and we're going to try to address the citizens' questions the best we can. But as that meeting that took place in Roanoke County, people were frustrated because a lot of the answers are, we don't know, we haven't been in communications with MVP. That has been part of what we've said. So
I think being open to potentially having follow-up questions would be something to consider. That's all.
I would agree with that because I think that there's so much frustration, and I think, and this is something I think I've said before, we need to be responsive to these citizens in our county on this issue. This is a big, big issue, and we've worked with our citizens, and this is an ongoing thing. Like, I don't even know which year it is, third year? I mean, and we need to, and this is important, and they waited tonight, and I know we had all that other stuff in front of us, but this affects their lives. So anything we can do to not just get the questions, but and I don't know, Steve, you're probably more aware about how to get information out to, down there if there's a problem with the internet or whatever, but there's got to be, as soon as we get the information and we start putting it up, I know Linda's going to have it, but there ought to be a way we can somehow even get it to people that don't have the internet. I especially think they want to know numbers to call, and I think that's a biggie, numbers to call.
I know there's the Mountain Valley Charitable Foundation. Do you think that they might be interested in putting something in their newsletter, maybe, with numbers to call?
I don't know how often that newsletter would come out, so I'd say this would be probably something we would need to probably print out and get into their hands.
Right, into their hands.
Yeah.
Well, and we could print out a few copies down at the library and have it, to disseminate.
I think that's probably going to be the quickest way. As soon as we collect all the information and the numbers and who to call for what reason, which that's going to take a little bit of time. So.
But we was the first county that said we didn't want the pipeline. Mm-hmm. Marty spent hours and hours on it. Craig has, the staff has. And it just frustrates me if people say we're not doing what we can do. We're doing all we can do. The staff is doing all they can do. We even hired an attorney, outside attorney for this. There's nothing we can do. The federal government and the state government has all control. If we had any control, we didn't want it here, it wouldn't be coming. We have no control. And it frustrates me that our staff has worked so hard on this for people to act like they haven't done anything. And for that, Craig, Marty, I apologize.
I know we didn't have that on the agenda, but I felt like that misinformation we needed to quell right away. Next item, I don't believe that there's an addendum, but the next is items of or consent agenda. Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Mox?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
New business, resolution recognizing Cord Hall, Christiansburg Town Council. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
I'm getting to it. Hold on just 1 minute, please. Sorry about that. Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Resolution of recognition, Krisha Chopra.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Resolution recognizing Cecile Newcomb, Blacksburg Town Council. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Resolution recognizing Joey Lyons, Montgomery County School Board.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll. The hour's getting late, and I was a little slow on that.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
County Administrator's Report.
Oh, I get to go before Marty. I hadn't noticed that.
That was my request.
Was that your request?
Well, it goes in alphabetical order.
Well, that's true. Actually, because the hour's late, I've only got one item I want to mention. I do want to comment on our trip to Richmond last week. I know that we just had a conversation about some frustrations with, things at the state level and the national level. I will say that we were greeted very warmly. We got an opportunity to talk to our entire legislative delegation while we were there. The state has their challenges just like we do. We agree to disagree on a number of items, but I do appreciate the work that they do up there, and I just hope they can find a way to come to consensus on a budget this year, because at the local level, and I shared this with several of them, at the local level, I'm just giving you a preview, this budget's going to be as challenging as any I've had in the last several years. And sure would be nice to see some help coming from the state. But other than that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have this evening.
County Attorney's Report.
The hour's late, Mr. Chairman, I have no report.
You ready to go home, Marty?
And now, well, there we go. Supervisor Fidzikowski.
No report.
Supervisor Biggs.
Just a couple things. First of all, I wanted to thank our board and the previous board for passing the resolution honoring David and Lindsay West, and they had it at the memorial and the lobby of the Lyric Theater. And all I can say about Lindsay is the hole that is left from her passing is going to take a lot of people to fill, because she's probably one of the greatest leaders Montgomery County has ever had. That's in my personal opinion. And I was honored that April DeMontz was able to go with me to the memorial service. So that was the first thing. The second thing is I just concur with everything Craig said about Government Day. We didn't return home with any money as usual. The next thing I would like to say is I had a citizen ask me, is the Sheriff's Department still doing inmate trash pickup around the county? I said I honestly didn't know, so I told Craig I really didn't know, because we used to get reports from the Sheriff's Office and now we don't get them. So
we will follow up and
okay,
find
so
out.
I don't know. And lastly, I have all my information from the Montgomery County Blacksburg Christiansburg Economic Development Group, the NBC group, and I'll give that to Craig to have scanned so that you all can have it. And that is all.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bone.
No report.
Supervisor Shepherd.
No report.
Supervisor King.
No report.
Supervisor DeMontz.
Just one thing for this board to consider. we received a letter from the Multiple Sclerosis Alliance of Virginia asking if we would issue a resolution proclaiming March as Multiple Sclerosis Education and Awareness Month. So I'd like to bring that to everybody's attention. I personally have a connection to MS, and so it's my honor to bring this forward, but I'd like for the board to consider it for a future agenda item, just making March Multiple Sclerosis Education and Awareness Month.
Well, can we just go like this?
Is there support for that?
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
All right.
You'll pass that to Craig?
Yeah, we'll pass that to Craig.
We'll get her done.
Is that everything?
That's it.
Okay. I will try to be very brief. You may have all seen that email from Emily Satterwhite in regards to testing at the Arsenal. And this is through a program and through Virginia Tech with graduate students to do the testing. It would be no cost to the county, and that was one of the biggest things I stressed and asked. It would be Virginia Tech going out and doing testing in the community, contacting citizens, asking for that. But one of the first steps is taking a tour of the Arsenal, and you have to be able to get a security clearance. So, one, I am not available Friday. I've got court. Daryl is at 8:30, and it's your district and across the street from my district.
And I wanted to go. I was hoping it would be at an appropriate time so I could, but I can't.
I can go. Unless anybody else
So
wants to
at
go.
8:30 to 11:30 is when, now, I would ask that you contact Ms. Satterwhite immediately because they've got to do a security background check on
Maybe
you.
not this late.
Well, not this late, but
Maybe in the morning.
first thing in the morning. And the only other thing I was thinking of, because Mr. Fidzikowski has been law enforcement recently, I don't know if that would help him pass a background check faster.
It probably hurt him.
I used to be able to pass them.
You used to be able to pass it, now he's a politician, so he probably can't. But if there anything else comes up, would anybody have any objection? First for Sarah and then for Steve to be, are you available Friday at 8:30?
Yes.
I know it's both of it, it's away from your districts, but Daryl and I can't be there.
Can two go together?
Two could go together. Are both of you available?
Yes.
And that way, and so you've got her email address that's present and her cell phone number on the email I forwarded. And so is everyone in support of that? Is there consensus?
I appreciate y'all's willingness to do that. Thank you.
The other thing is, and I know, and I've had the opportunity to speak with April about how are we going to proceed from here. There was a question about having folks from Albemarle County. That could not be coordinated tonight for them to be present and potentially look at GALAC since they were the most recent to do it. And then in those discussions, we talked about whether we were going to, that would be the end of the information process. And then voting on it in the first meeting in March. So that's a kind of a timetable for you as supervisors, and that's something that April and I talked about. Is everybody comfortable with that timetable?
Are you saying that you are going to get the GALACs and the Albemarle?
Definitely.
We're going to reach out to them.
I'm sorry.
We're going to reach out to them. I had conversations with Albemarle. They just weren't able to work out something for tonight, and based on the timing, it was probably good that it didn't. But going to reach out to Albemarle, Prince William, Prince William and Albemarle are the two that have changed in the last 50 years to the county executive form of government, and then apparently GALAC's made a change as well. So I was going to reach out to all three. I'll actually be attending a conference later this week where I should see, I think I'll probably see all three, but I was going to take care of that this week to see if they can be available.
Other than what Carol presented as far as financials, were there any other financial benefits that, other than obviously Chris mentioned, maybe we could take advantage of 1.5% for our first $8 million. Was there anything else out there?
There were no other, as I would call them, quantifiable benefits. A lot of it depends on the efficiencies that could be gained over time once you convert it, but to be able to put a dollar figure to that, it would be very difficult.
All right, so that's the timetable. The other thing is, I want to appreciate or thank all of you. I know that my wife tends to say that you asked for this, and your spouses can all say that as well, or significant others. But the hour's late, and I appreciate all the hard work that all of us did here tonight. I will say that the reason I ask those questions are I read the papers, and you may remember that the treasurer of Giles County was moonlighting and being paid an hourly wage during the day to be working for Craig County. That has happened with constitutional officers. It wasn't to be disrespectful to any of the officers in present, but that was the case. That being said, and there's nothing else, and the hour late, this meeting is adjourned.